The Unexplained Rundown is pleased to partner with tpublic.com and bring you some fun and fantastical apparel and accessories that are truly out of this world. If you're keen to support the show and see it grow, be sure to check out some of the cool designs in the merch store and grab yourself a bargain. Use the link in the description below.
Or concern you about the unknown and the unidentified flying object?
Oh, yes, we discussed it at every conference that we had with the military, and they never were able to make me a concrete report on.
Do you have anything on the subject, sir?
No, I haven't had anything on the subject, and there's always things like that going on. The flying saucers, and we've had other things, you know.
For years, the world has seen reality distorted, facts manipulated, and truth hidden. But there's even more to the story than anyone has ever suspected, because no one has been able to see the whole picture until now.
Friends, welcome back to another episode of the Unexplained Rundown. I am your host, Grant Levac, and if you've found this channel intentionally, then, like me, you're intrigued by the unexplained mysteries of this mortal coil of ours, and you crave to know what's real and what's not. So welcome one, welcome all. We've got some friends in the house. Good morning, UFO. Amy was joining well before we started today, so great to see 2 a.m. for you in on your side of the pond to get you started. So, and yes, Thanksgiving is around the corner. So to any of my US brethren watching today's episode, happy Thanksgiving to you and your families, obviously, for later this week. Some other friends in the house. We've got Jimmy. Always good to see you, my friend. Thank you for joining. You never miss it, so I appreciate your ongoing commitment to going watching whenever I go live. Likewise with Jasmine, always good to see you too, my friend. And we've got a few others in the house. We got Plant Watering Citizen. Not sure if it's a first time for you, but if you're a first time viewer, welcome. Shane Woods in the house. Great to see you, my friend. Thank you for joining. And who else we have? Got LiDAR Anomalies. Finally made it to a live stream. Hello from Norway. Great to have you with us. We're certainly starting to develop an international audience. So thank you so much, LiDAR Anomalies, for joining. Short or Cook One, great to see you. Thanks for joining. And likewise with you, Mark. Thanks for hanging with me, taking some time out of your evening to join in. So thank you, folks, for taking some time to join wherever you are. It's always good to be with you. As always, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy the content, if you enjoy each episode of the Unexplained Rundown. Let folks know, help the channel grow. We do have some Patreon and YouTube membership options as well. So if you want to go above the customary like, share, subscribe, check out some of the links to Patreon and YouTube membership in the show notes below. And of course, always want to thank our Patreon members, Jimmy, Jasmine, Shane, Clint, Telekinetic for our YouTube member. So thank you guys for your ongoing support. It is truly appreciated. Another arrival, the Magenta Project, 1933 UFO crash in Italy. Hi, Grant. Glad I happened to catch you just at the right time. Well, welcome. Thank you for joining. Well, let's get into it, folks. As always, no idea how long we're going to be going with this live stream. My goal is to get it under the 2-hour mark one of these days. But let's kick things off with our slide deck. And so the title of today's episode is, as we know, new AARO Director testifies before Congress for less than 35 minutes. A little bit too short for my liking. Was expecting a little bit more, something a little bit more comprehensive than 35 minutes. Alas, it was 35 minutes. That's all we got to work with. So that's what we're going to be focusing on at the front end of this episode. That's our lead story. Then we'll jump into the rundown, have a look at some of the other stories that are happening closer to home and abroad. So let's kind of kick things off with setting up providing some context and some background information that will kind of inform leading into the new AARO Director, Dr. John T. Kosloski's testimony before Kirsten Gillibrand's Senate Armed Services Subcommittee hearing, checking in on AARO's progress. Also wanted to remind you too, we do have a poll for YouTube watchers. We have a poll, so Spotify, you won't be able to participate, obviously, but you can certainly take a bit of a mental vote if you wish. So today's poll is: will the new AARO Director restore public trust and AARO's reputation? So the choices are: yeah, I'm liking the new guy, or dude, it's AARO, or not while Goff gives the evil eye, and last but not least, thank you, I needed a good laugh. So feel free to cast your vote. We'll check in about halfway through the show and have a look how you all voted. All right, so let's kick things off with most recently AARO's Consolidated Annual Report for fiscal year 2024. That was released, I believe, on the 14th of November, so a couple weeks back now. And so we'll use that as a starting point. So if you haven't read AARO's Consolidated Annual Report for fiscal year 2024, no real bombshells in there or anything. A few nuggets which I've kind of highlighted and we'll go through this evening. But for those of you that haven't read the report, it is linked in the show notes below. So if you do want to check it out, have a look. But we'll start things off with the formal press release that was put out by the Pentagon. So 14th of November, Department of Defense releases the annual report on UAP. And we'll just kind of read through this again for the frame of reference for those that have not read the report or are new to the UAP conversation and not sure what's about. Again, blind as a badger, so the goggles will have to go on, folks. So this week, this was obviously in the week of the 14th of November. This week, the Department of Defense and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence delivered to Congress the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office's annual report on UAP, Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, as required by the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2022, as amended by the NDAA for fiscal year 2023. Analyzing and undertaking the potential threats posed by UAP is an ongoing collaborative effort involving many departments and agencies, and the department thanks the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and other contributing departments and agencies for their collaborative efforts to produce this report. The safety of this is a key paragraph, the safety of our service personnel, our bases and installations, and the protection of U.S. operations security on land, in the skies, seas, and space are paramount. We take reports of incursions into our designated space, land, sea, or airspaces seriously and examine each one. The All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office is leading DoD's efforts in coordination with ODNI and other government agencies to document, analyze, and when possible, resolve UAP reports using a rigorous scientific framework and a data-driven approach. This year's UAP report covers reports from May 1st, 2023 to June 1st, 2024, as well as any UAP report from previous time periods that were not included in the earlier report. AARO received 757 UAP reports during this period. 485 of these reports featured UAP incidents that occurred during the reporting period. The remaining 272 featured UAP incidents that occurred between 2021 and 2022, but were not reported to AARO until this reporting period, and consequently were not included in previous annual UAP reports. This brought the total cases that AARO has been receiving to over 1,600 as of June 1st, 2024. And so you can certainly read the report at your leisure, again, looking at the links in the show notes below. But we're going to have a look at the report now. We're not going to read through the whole report, but I'm just going to call out a few details that I found interesting. And if you've got comments, feel free to type them into the chat. We will have an opportunity to share some of your comments, questions. So feel free to opine if you wish. So let's have a look at AARO's Consolidated Annual Report on UAP for fiscal year 2024. Now, I might just zoom on in a bit so it's a little easier on the eyes there. So I'm not going to read through the whole report because it's not too long to read if you haven't read it. It's around about 16 pages. But I am going to call out some of the key information Obviously, I'm going to skip through the first couple of highlights because we kind of just read that in the press release. But it is interesting to note that AARO resolved 118 cases during the reporting period. As of May 31 of 2024, AARO has an additional 174 cases queued for closure. As AARO always likes to reiterate, AARO has discovered no evidence of extraterrestrial beings, activity, or technology. U.S. military air crews provided 2 reports that identified flight safety concerns, and 3 reports described pilots being, this is interesting, described pilots being trailed or shadowed. Interesting they use those words, trailed or shadowed by UAP. So that would suggest some form of intelligent control if there's trailing or shadowing. To date, AARO has no indications or confirmation that these activities were attributable to foreign adversaries. That's a very interesting paragraph. So what was it? What was it that was trailing or shadowing these military, these air crews? Hope to get a bit more information and clarity from AARO on that over time. Could have been prosumer drones, hobbyist drones. You'd want to think at that, at the kind of velocities and altitudes that military air crews fly. I don't know, not necessarily beyond the scope of possibility, but that was an interesting paragraph. AARO is also expanding. This is one that's key for us, obviously, as interested Aussies and Kiwis down under. AARO is also expanding engagement with foreign partners to share information and collaborate on best practices for resolving UAP cases. Well, we still don't know what Australia, New Zealand, the UK have shared with AARO on UAP to date and any practices that they've adopted to identify and analyze and resolve cases. And I suspect that there is nothing being done, continue to be done by Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. We know that the US and Canada are quite engaged in the conversation. So we're going to talk more about AARO's efforts to expand engagement with foreign partners to share information and further collaboration. Scope of the report, each report, annual report, each report shall include, with respect to the year covered by the report, the following information. And the key one again for us is AARO is congressionally mandated to provide an update on the consultations by the United States with allies and partners on efforts to track, understand, and address UAP. That was their congressional mandate, to coordinate with allies of the United States and international partners to better understand the nature and extent of UAP. So you would expect to see some reference to AARO's efforts to engage foreign allies of the United States and foreign partners in this report, even though it's a little bit lackluster, and we're going to talk about that as we go through. Yeah, so Jasmine makes a good point there. If I just pull up your quote, Jasmine is saying, share with the Five Eyes. So most certainly we know that AARO is actively engaged with the Five Eyes because of its Five Eyes inaugural UAP caucus working group meeting last May. So we would certainly expect Five Eyes to be apprised and updated on AARO's efforts, and that information to be relayed back, that engagement that AARO has to be relayed back to Kirsten Gillibrand's Armed Services Subcommittee on Emerging Threats, and I can't remember the full name of it. But this is interesting. This is the first time I believe that I have seen this referred to in one of AARO's annual reports. AARO drafted, I could be wrong, but this is just stuck out at me. AARO drafted this report in coordination with Air Force Research Laboratory, AFRL. Now, for any of you that follow, my episodes, my show, live streams on the Unexplained Rundown, Air Force Research Laboratory may ring a bell for you. And the reason it may ring a bell, we'll come back to AARO's annual report in just a moment. I'm just going to fire up another report here. What you're looking at on screen is the most recent Senate estimates brief on UAP. So basically a briefing document that is provided to The two leads on UAP related matters in Senate estimates, which is the at the time of this this document, last updated 8th of April of this year, lead for the Air Force was Air Marshal Robert Chipman, who's now been replaced by Chief of Air Force Air Marshal Stephen Chappell, and Professor Tanya Monroe, who's the Chief Defense Scientist for the Defense Science and Technology Group. So those are the two individuals responsible for fronting up to Senate estimates and answering questions that maybe senators like Senator Peter Whish-Wilson have on the UAP topic in an Australian context. But this is what is interesting to note. In this document, where is it? Here we go. Defense Science and Technology Group works with allied scientists, however, to date has not collaborated on UAP, nor has there been any indication that collaboration would be of benefit. Specifically, Defense Science and Technology Group collaborates closely with the US Air Force Research Laboratory, who contributed to AARO's report, through the Air Senior National Representative Forum, who have not placed any priority on collaboration in UAP. Now, this report, the Senate estimates brief, is current as of April of this year. There was a recent Senate estimates at the start of this month. I've requested through FOIA an update of this document. So it's interesting to see that what the language will be in a future update of this document to see if there is any collaboration or engagement between the Air Force Research Laboratory and the Defense Science and Technology Group, who we'll talk about a little bit further on in this report. So you know, is there a discrepancy there? I mean, you know, when did the Air Force Research Laboratory start contributing to AARO's reports? Is that a new contribution? If it is, it'll be interesting to see what commentary again comes out of a future update of this document. So let's come back to, where's my mouse here? Here it is. So let's come back to AARO's Consolidated Annual Report on UAP, and we'll just continue on down. And you can see there's a lot of bodies that are involved in in contributing to AARO's report. You know, some standouts. You got Space Force, you got the DIA, DOE, obviously the US Air Force, which has been very, very quiet and very mum on the UAP topic. So it's quite an extensive list of bodies that have contributed to this report. As of October 2024, there are 1,652 reports in total, so over 1,600. 708 occurred in the air domain, 49 occurred in the space domain, which is interesting, and none occurred in the maritime or transmedium domains, which is interesting, considering that you had former Rear Admiral Timothy Gallaudet testifying for the House Oversight and Accountability hearing on UAP. Was it UAP Exposing the Truth? And you know, he could only reference one occurrence of a USO back in the 80s. So not getting much information on transmedium activity. AARO resolved 49 cases during the reporting period, all of which resolved to prosaic objects such as various types of balloons, bird, and UAS, unmanned aerial systems, or in other words, drones. AARO is working closely with its IC, intelligence community, and S&T, science and technology partners, to understand and attribute the 21 cases received this reporting period that merit further analysis based on reported anomalous characteristics and or behavior. Those are the 21 that we're interested in. So those are the ones that have potentially showcased some anomalous behavior or activity. We're not interested in the ones that they identify as prosaic and they palm off to the other agencies to follow up on. They're the ones that we're interested in. And so it'd be very interesting to see what updates AARO is able to provide. If it's one of its goals is to be a lot more transparent with the general public, what actually happens with those 21 cases. Let's continue on. And again, I'm just calling out some things that I've found interesting. Obviously, a graphic showing that the balloons are the most commonly identified prosaic resolution, followed by drones, 16%, followed by birds. That'll make West happy, satellites, and aircraft. AARO consistently receives UAP reports from the FAA on a weekly basis. So this is an interesting development, which is a significant increase from the previous reporting period and reflects the success of AARO's efforts to strengthen relationships with its reporting partners. And by the sounds of it, there is a reduced stigma across commercial pilots to now actually start reporting. I know Ryan Graves' group, the Americans for Safe Aerospace, are trying to get legislation passed that would make UAP reporting mandatory for civil aviation, which I think would be a big win and certainly bring a lot more data into the conversation. Overview of analysis and findings. Unidentified lights and round spherical orb-shaped objects made up the bulk of cases in which reports provided distinct visual characteristics. Objects within the other category. Remember, the ODNI's preliminary assessment on UAP back on the 25th of June 2021 had a catch-all other bin. So other category include unique characteristics such as green fireball. This is interesting, a jellyfish, and we've heard jellyfish now a number of times, not just from the Immaculate Constellation report that was released at the recent hearing, but also we've heard Sarah Gam, who was maybe not contracted is the right word, but she was one of the analysts with the UAP task force. Didn't necessarily was employed by the UAP task force, but was allocated time to analyze UAP related data, UAP task force related data. So jellyfish is an interesting inclusion in this annual report with flashing lights that are multicolored and a silver rocket approximately 6 feet long. Interesting inclusion. Interesting graphic. Again, you can see that lights make up 65% of those with visual characteristics, followed by orbs, spheres, and that are round. You've got then cylinders, other disc shape, only 1%, which is interesting. And disc, flying saucers were so prevalent in the 50s and the 60s, maybe a lot of hoaxing back then. Triangle, and you have square and polygon shapes. So a lot of this information in the past, you remember shapes were classified. John Greenwald Jr. couldn't even get any information regarding common shapes associated with UAP. That was all redacted. And now finally, AARO is being a bit more transparent on this front. I think that's pretty much all of the, during the reporting period, 81 reports originated from US military operating areas. Interesting. Poor old Australia, not on the hotspot, I suspect, because there's not a lot of activity that's been maybe reported by US personnel in Australia. That would really be maybe limited to Pine Gap in smack bang in the middle of Australia, or Northwest Cape. Some of the or some of the military installations in Australia. Notable trends regarding prosaic objects. AARO increasingly receives cases that is able to resolve to the Starlink satellite constellation. So I know Starlink is causing a lot of headaches for commercial aviators and everyday folks on the ground that just simply misidentify Starlink, the Starlink trains or the racetrack train if it's Starlink as UAP. In many other cases, birds, again, to Mick West's surprise and delight, are commonly misidentified as UAP due to sensor artifacts resulting from compression and pixelation that often renders the object as an anomalous, an amorphous blob or orb. Electro-optical/infrared sensor glare can also cause distorted pixelation of the object's true shape. Moreover, full motion video FMV analysis, consistent with other confirmed examples of birds in flight, commonly display birds as flickering objects. This phenomena captured by FMV is indicative of flapping wings. So it's good that they're actually giving us that kind of information. As much as people kind of diss whenever they hear the words birds, you're going to find that 95% of UAP that are reported are going to turn out to be prosaic objects. So those are the sorts of things that they are. Flight safety issues. This is an important one. Of the 392 FAA reports received during the reporting period, only one, and one is all you need, only one report mentioned a possible flight safety issue during the event. In this instance, a commercial aircrew reported a near miss with a cylindrical object while over the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of New York. AARO continues its research into an analysis of this case. Again, that'll be a really interesting one to see what comes of that from AARO. AARO possesses no data to indicate the capture or exploitation of UAP. AARO is working with mission partners to formalize a process in the event UAP material is captured, drawing on current US government capabilities and operating procedures. No health physiological impacts from UAP incidents reported. AARO received no reports suggesting any observers of UAP suffered any physiological impacts or adverse health effects. AARO executes a strategic partner engagement program conducting outreach and liaison activities, tough one, with a number of bodies, including foreign partners in support of AARO's UAP mission. So when I read that in AARO's report, I immediately filed a FOIA request a US FOIA request to see if I can get more information as to what those past date or future planned liaison activities and outreach efforts are across the Five Eyes, because I want to focus on not Australia, but also see if we can capture some information across the Five Eyes. Scientific, technological, and operational analysis of data. AARO has partnered with the following organizations to leverage available resources and expertise and establish the scientific and technical foundation necessary to execute the AARO mission. Here we go again. Air Force Research Laboratory provides research on air and spaceborne sensing technology and more general assessments of propulsion, stealth, and other emerging capabilities which may be operational in the next few years. Georgia Tech Research Institute developed the Gremlin sensor architecture, described in additional detail on page 13, which will be deployed in the first quarter of fiscal year 2025 to support pattern of life analysis. Georgia Tech Research Institute will continue to support sensor architecture analysis, development, and operations. So I'm going to stop there because I want to come back to that document. I'll say a hello to a few friends that have joined in the live chat. I now want to take you back to that document we were looking at before, because this is where there's some additional key commentary. But before I do, let me just say hello to a few friends that have joined in the room. Let's just see who we have here. Ryan Sprague, always good to see you, my friend. What do you make of the alarming amount of drone incursions over US military bases in the US and UK? Do you think AARO will be involved with this at all? They said that they aren't a drone office. Yeah, I mean, geez, the US and the UK, man, they got some massive problems with drone activity at the moment, and it's kind of it's kind of embarrassing, if I'll be honest, for the Pentagon, because for the mightiest military in the world to be having such issues with drone technology and not bringing down any of these drones because there's questions over rules of engagement, and they can't identify intent or if there is a threat. I think it's kind of turning into a bit of a laughing stock for those that are bad actors or foreign adversaries, because they're seeing how woeful the Pentagon is in its inability to deal with drone incursions that are operating with impunity. The counter argument to what I've read, and I think Tim McMillan pointed this out, is that, well, perhaps the U.S. defense, U.S. military don't want to show an aggressive takedown of drones or have a reaction, because maybe the drones are foreign adversarial technology that is purposely flying over these military bases to test and identify what the response would be from troops, military on the ground. They're testing response capabilities. That's a counter argument that I've heard. So we'll actually talk about the drone issue, because there was a short comment that the new AARO Director, John Kosloski, made in his testimony before Kirsten Gillibrand's hearing, specifically on that. So it's a good point that you raise. And so we'll certainly come to that in today's show. At least they didn't say Superman. We've got a few comments. Plant watering citizen. Well, it's easy for NHI to achieve affordable low-tech invisibility. Just make sure your crafts look like birds, drones, and blimps. Enjoy flying around unchallenged. It can disguise itself as something prosaic. Ducati Girl says, hi, welcome. Great to see you. Yes, I agree with you, Ryan. It is extremely embarrassing, not just for folks that are for obviously those that are US citizens, but even for us patriotic allies of the US. We feel for you, and it is a bit embarrassing to see. And thanks for your kind words, my friend. Always good to have you in the chat and sharing your comments. Jimmy's comments. I'm very surprised that during the AARO meeting with John Kosloski, that no mention of the Gremlin sensor system was asked by any members of Congress. Yeah, that was one of several questions that weren't asked, that I was very surprised and disappointed that Kirsten Gillibrand didn't even bother to press. And you can really notice the difference between the House hearing and the Senate hearing, how kind of feisty and to the point Nancy Mason, Anna Paulina Luna, and some of the others, they were very pointed with their questions, and they're actually quite I thought they pressed pretty good on some of the questions they asked. You didn't see that from Kirsten Gillibrand in the Senate hearing, and I suspect that's because AARO is Gillibrand's baby, and she doesn't want to be seen to berating her child, perhaps. Drones, the new swamp gas. Good point indeed, Jimmy. And plant watering says 100%. Though we don't know what was asked during the closed session. That's a good point. So there was an open to the public, and then there was a closed session. So we'll never know what happened behind closed doors, although I know that John Greenwald Jr. has submitted a FOIA request for some of the materials, I think the classified AARO report and any documentation that maybe John Kosloski provided in that closed session. What he gets back, who knows? So anyway, I wanted to bring you back to this document because we were talking about the Air Force Research Laboratory. And it's really, AARO has engaged the Air Force Research Laboratory to assist with development of sensing, architecture, and so on. So what is interesting in this document, this Senate estimates brief, is, again, we come down to here, from here. Defense Science and Technology Group does not conduct specific research and development on UAP and is currently not funded to do so. Defense Science and Technology Group supports Air Force in that there is no scientific reason to conduct research on UAP. Fair call. Not that I agree with it, but fair call. Defense Science and Technology Group provides support to the ADF, Australian Defence Force, to identify and classify objects detected by sensing technology and has projects that are aligned with the requirements of the Defence Strategic Review to improve sensing and intelligence gathering in support of Australia's defence interests. So that raises the question, well, does the Defence Science and Technology Group potentially have, would there be value in it, the DSTG, engaging with AARO to better understand what AARO is doing with the Georgia Tech Research Institute, as well as the Air Force Research Laboratory, to better understand what sensing equipment it is able to develop? Is that going to be potentially of value and benefit to Five Eyes member countries? Quite possible. And I think that's an important question that Senator Whish-Wilson would be interested to ask has the Defense Science and Technology Group engaged the Air Force Research Laboratory and AARO on the sensor suite that it has developed, because this gremlin system sounds pretty cool, and that's a good segue to actually come back to AARO's annual report. And I know we're spending a little bit of time on AARO's report, but I want to now kind of dive into the gremlin system. And it mentions here NASA is the focal point for academic research and open source data analysis on UAP topics. Haven't really heard much from NASA after we discovered that Mark McInerney was appointed the NASA's Director of UAP Research. I've actually submitted a FOIA request for emails between Mark McInerney and the new AARO Director, John Kosloski, to see if there's been any engagement since Kosloski took over in August of this year. AARO this is one that's obviously the gripe of many folks, and one that is applicable to the lack of public trust that not just the general public, but whistleblowers are currently exhibiting towards AARO. AARO is really, reaffirming its position and reiterating here that AARO is authorized by law to receive all UAP-related information, including any classified national security information involving military intelligence or intelligence-related activities at all levels of classification, regardless of any restrictive access controls, special access controls, or compartmented special access programs. There was no restriction on AARO receiving any past or present UAP-related information, regardless of the organizational affiliation of the original classification authority within the department, the IC, or any other United States government department or agency. So again, they're really trying to restore some public trust and let folks know, guys, we're authorized and cleared to see and hear all of your classified testimony, so please come and talk to us. But unfortunately, I don't think Kirkpatrick left a very good taste in folks' mouth, and certainly for David Grusch, who never got the assurances he wanted from AARO, so that he would then be comfortable and confident that he could sit down and reveal what he knows in a classified setting and reveal all of his classified testimony in its entirety. Majority of AARO's case holdings remain unresolved due to a lack of data needed to further analysis. Well, what can you say to that? I mean, there'll always be, I suppose, some cases that they just can't reach a conclusion on because they just don't have enough data. But it's good to know that they won't close a case until they have enough data to actually reach a resolution. So, it's reassuring to know that whilst they'll have a lot of unresolved, then they're not just going to fob them to the side and say, oh no, they're at least being transparent there and saying they don't have enough data. But of course, it would be nice to see what some of that data, even if it's a lack of data, is, because it's one thing for AARO to say one thing and then to show us your work, show us the work you've done to reach these conclusions and determinations in this report. AARO has begun collections using, this is where we come to the gremlin, using a prototype sensor system, Gremlin, for detecting, tracking, and characterizing UAP. Gremlin demonstrated functionality and successfully collected data during a test event in March 2024. And the graphic that they provide on the Gremlin system is actually pretty cool. I mean, I don't know a whole lot about sensor systems, but geez, it looks like this Gremlin can do a lot of things. 2D search radar, you've got long range, electro-optical, infrared, SATCOM, you've got spectrum monitor, you've got long range, you got GPS. I mean, and all these other things, I don't even know what they are. So others might be more well-versed on what that is than I am. But for me, someone that's a bit of a layman, at face value, it looks like this Gremlin system is a pretty comprehensive sensor stack. So I don't think, were there any other things I highlighted? In April 2024, AARO re-engaged, this is an interesting one, on its X account to share information and updates with the UAP community of interest on social media. Why I highlighted this, funny story, I'd reached out to Susan Goff in March of this year, asking why AARO had been so quiet and gone stone cold on use of its social media account, namely X, formerly Twitter. And she ghosted me. She never responded after close to a dozen follow-ups. I think I just got to the point where she probably just had blocked my incoming emails, and I eventually gave up. But then before you know it, a couple of weeks, and I'm not claiming that AARO's re-engagement on X had anything to do with my outreach to Susan Goff, but I just found it an interesting synchronicity nonetheless. I do have a FOIA that's pending, searching for communications around that time pertaining to AARO's social media strategy. So it'd be interesting to see what comes back from that. In March 2024, AARO launched an R-Space. Where have we heard R-Space before? Sarah Gam, Jason Sands have talked about the UAP Task Force Forum. That was kind of like an online collaborative tool that could be used by people with different clearances, also referred to R-Space. So AARO is doing the same R-Space page for the cleared community and provides monthly updates on its work and findings up to the top secret SCI level to promote increased collaboration and information sharing related to UAP. So it sounds like they're following the approach that the UAP task force took with that R-Space collaborative tool. The relationship between AARO and US Air Force, including the National Air and Space Intelligence Center and the Air Force Research Laboratory, continues to deepen and expand in terms of collection, analysis, exploitation, and resolution. So again, the fact that the Australian Defence Science and Technology Group has an ongoing relationship with a partnership, I guess, with the Air Force Research Laboratory. Again, be interesting to keep a close eye on what the Defence Science and Technology Group say in the coming months and year with that deepened partnership that AARO is going to have with the Air Force Research Laboratory. And then the rest is just terminology. So again, I know we've spent quite a bit of time there, folks. I wanted to use that as some preamble for what we're going to dive into next. So that is a good opportunity for us to now switch gears. And what happened after AARO released its Consolidated Annual Report? Well, we discovered that Dr. John Kosloski held a off-camera media roundtable. Select outlets of the news media were invited to be, ask questions of the new AARO director and receive, obviously, some introductory remarks from John Kosloski. So let me play for you. I'll just show you again, if any of you are interested, if you want to read, I'm not going to go through it in its entirety. Which one is it? Make sure I'm pulling up the right one here, folks. This is the one, I think. There we go. So I'm not going to read through this, but if you want to read the transcript of that off-camera media roundtable that was hosted by Susan Goff as well as John Kosloski, you can. But what I'm going to do is there are a couple of key clips. It was recorded thanks to News Nation. One of News Nation's reporters recorded the questions and answers and John Kosloski's opening remarks. So I'm going to pull up my fair use banner because I want to be able to play for you some of the key clips that I think are of interest. So again, we're just citing fair use here. We're educating the public and critiquing the content that we are sharing. So let's start with, and by the way, the link is in the show notes below. If you want to listen to one of the latest episodes of Reality Check. I think it was not the most recent one, the one just before that came out from Ross today. the entire audio commentary is included in that episode of Reality Check. So if you want to listen to it in its entirety, you certainly can. So let's start with the first point. So this was a question that was asked by, these were some opening comments that John Kosloski had during that off-camera media briefing. So let me play this for you.
Unidentified objects in any domain pose potential threats to safety and security. Reports of unidentified anomalous phenomena, particularly near national security sites, must be treated seriously and investigated with scientific rigor by the U.S. government. So
it begs the question, why is Australia not following our US allies and Five Eyes partners' lead on UAP when, you remember back to the shoot down of the Chinese spy balloon and those 3 unidentified aerial objects in February of last year? So the Royal Australian Air Force, again, if you've been following my coverage of their engagement, or rather lack thereof, on this topic, you'll remember that the Royal Australian Air Force, Chief of Air Force Air Marshal Robert Shipman, in the Senate estimates in February of last year, said that he had sought a briefing, information from the US via the air attaché in Washington, D.C., on the shoot down of the Chinese spy balloon and those 3 unidentified aerial objects, because the Australian Department of Defence wanted to get better information on the source of those objects, their identity, and what learnings could be gathered from the US responses to those shoot down events. And those objects, the Chinese spy balloon, those 3 unidentified aerial objects, were shot down because they represented a clear and present threat to national security and safety of flight. Now, again, you've got the hypocritical comments there from the Chief of Air Force. In February, when all this went down, they'll happily seek a briefing from the US on those shoot down events. But up until that point in time, February of last year, they hadn't even requested a briefing on UAP, which the Pentagon has said time and time again, as well as men and women in Congress, that UAP represent a potential national security threat and safety of flight risk. So you're kind of just echoing John Kozlowski's comments there. Anything that is unidentified in any domain is an issue and represents a potential national security threat. So Australia should get off its ass and realize and recognize what the new AARO Director is saying. Let's now play the second clip. This was a question that was asked by Brandy Vincent, who does some wonderful reporting for Defence Scoop. I've had some engagement with Brandy Vincent. I won't go into details of that, obviously, but she does some great reporting. So give Defence Scoop a follow if you haven't already.
Thanks. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm Brandy Vincent with Defence Scoop. One question on the report and then a follow-up. It noted that the next step for Gremlin, the Gremlin capability, is conducting a 90-day pattern of life collection at a national security site. Where is that going to be? How did you pick that location? And what ultimately are you guys trying to accomplish with that?
So it's currently deployed. We'd rather not say exactly where it is because we want it to be an unbiased test and don't want to invite folks to come and do flyovers and test against the system. We chose that specific location because of the environment. We expect there to be a lot of variety in the types of things that we're going to see, and there have been UAP reports in that general area. And we're trying to build a baseline. So right now we have this geographic bias where we are getting reports near the national security sites, but we also have a bias from pilots and other security personnel. So we want to have a better understanding of what normal looks like near those national security sites. And then eventually we'll be expanding our baseline investigations to other areas in the U.S. to look at what normal looks like away from national security sites.
So again, it kind of brings me back to the point I was getting at before. If the Defence Science and Technology Group provides support to the Australian Defence Force to identify and classify objects detected by sensing technology and has projects that are aligned with the requirements of the Defence Strategic Review to improve sensing and intelligence gathering in support of Australia's interest, wouldn't it therefore be of value for the Defense Science and Technology Group to be briefed by AARO on the Gremlin system. Professor Tanya Monroe, the chief defense scientist, wouldn't it be of value for her to be briefed by AARO on this Gremlin system and or the Air Force Research Laboratory's efforts, which, as stated in AARO's annual report, the Air Force Research Laboratory provides research on air and spaceborne sensing technology and more general assessments of propulsion, stealth, and other emerging capabilities, which may be operational within the next few years. So those are questions that I would certainly love to see Senator Whish-Wilson ask the Chief Defense Scientist, Professor Tanya Monroe, as she heads up the Defense Science Technology Group, and she is the co-lead for all UAP-related matters. She is the one that is responsible for fronting up with the Chief of Air Force at a Senate estimates to ask questions. So if there is benefit of such a system that in the interest of that can benefit Australia's national interest, then, if you haven't been briefed on AARO about it, why not? If you have, to what extent have you had engagement with AARO on sensor technology that can be of benefit to Australia? And I imagine other Five Eyes countries would be interested in that as well. So then we kind of move on to a key one. This is another audio clip that was taken from that off-camera media briefing where Dr. John Kosloski talks about foreign engagement following a question that he receives.
And then for the foreign engagement, we're working on increasing our foreign engagement. We recognize that UAP is not just going to be a domestic issue. The office has focused primarily on U.S. government, and we're going to be growing to public reporting soon in 2025, and we're going to be growing our international partnerships hopefully also in 2025. So starting with the group that we have the most familiarity with, and then growing that.
Are there any specific countries you can name in terms of who you aim to work with?
We are going to be starting with the traditional allies of the DoD and the IC, and we'll leave it at that for now until we have those partnerships well established, and then we'll probably come out with more information.
Traditional allies of the DoD and IC, who does that scream? Five Eyes. So it sounds like AARO is definitely going to be ramping up and broadening its international engagement, again, starting with its closest DoD and IC allies, US, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand. So for me, that asks the question, well, how many future Five Eyes UAP working group meetings have been agreed on? How many meetings or engagements will be taking place in 2025? And how many engagements have there been to date? We only know of the inaugural working group meeting of May of last year, and how bloody hard it was to get any information from not just Australia, but New Zealand, from the UK on that inaugural meeting. It's like trying to get blood from a stone. So that is, again, another question that I would very much love to see Senator Whish-Wilson ask the Australian Department of Defence, is about past date engagement and future scheduled engagement that Australia has with AARO as part of the Five Eyes. A couple of comments that have come through just to break up the clips that we're playing here. We got Chili Farm Brisbane. Great to see you. Thanks for joining, my friend. Always good to see you in the live chat. LiDAR anomalies. Should we worry that they haven't already a baseline for normal at national security sites? Sounds like something one would have in case of enemy incursions. It seems to have certainly taken them a long time to start to explore what that norm is, that baseline. But government works incredibly slow. So, at least now, who knows what efforts that were being undertaken under Kirkpatrick, but it's good to know. And I'd say the Gremlin system was something that he championed, and it was probably a long process to get that prototyped and so on. Who knows? I'm only speculating. But Chili Farm Brisbane says, I uploaded something today on Sandia back in 1999 at LiDAR, so long enough. Response to your comments there, LiDAR anomalies. Plant watering citizen. As for NATO allies, we're not regarded as close. Yeah, I mean, and will AARO be, extending its outreach to NATO allies? What other countries around the globe will start? I mean, we know Japan is certainly quite active in its efforts to investigate the UAP topic. So, watch this space, basically. So let's move on to the next audio clip from the off-camera media briefing with Dr. John Kosloski. This clip, he talks about UAP.
Thank you, Radras, for the help. Have you found anything that might be a breakthrough technology? I know you're saying you don't know if there are breakthroughs yet, but something that might be a breakthrough technology near the military sites, some of those sightings you've seen near the military sites, have you found anything that might be that, or have they all just been drones and UAS?
Definitely not all just drones and UAS. So we have several particularly interesting cases. We're working on, within the office, working with our partners to downgrade several of those cases so we can talk about them publicly. But there are interesting cases that my physics and engineering background and time in the IC, I do not understand. And I don't know anybody else who understands them either.
Fascinating comment from the new AARO director. Things that he does not understand with his background and physics knowledge. Now, I'm wondering if those, those particular cases that he's referencing there are those 21 cases that AARO has referenced in its annual Consolidated Annual Report, where it was, they were displaying anomalous characteristics or behaviors. Again, they're the ones that we're interested in. We want to know more about the stuff that you can't resolve based purely on what you've indicated that you don't understand, that, based on your current, world view and knowledge of physics and science. So again, that would be something to keep a close eye on, and it'll be interesting. Certainly, it's a very, for me personally, it seems to be a very different tone that John Kosloski is taking with his comments there than his predecessor, Kirkpatrick. So it'll be interesting to keep tabs on those comments that he just made and see how maybe his position evolves over time. And if he distances himself from Kirkpatrick's stance, who never really wanted the job, he came across as being completely lackluster with his enthusiasm for doing the job. So, some folks, Christopher Mellon and others, are kind of hinting at, we'll give this guy a chance. You've got Jay Stratton's come out and said, John Kosloski was the NSA support for the UAP task force. His friends, Jay Stratton is friends or was friends with John Kosloski. He trusts him. He believes he does a great job. He's very knowledgeable. So if he's getting kind of like he's being vouched for by Jay Stratton, again, it would be very interesting to follow Dr. John Kosloski over the next year to see how he runs AARO, how AARO operates under his leadership, and if the positioning of AARO shifts or it changes. So interesting comments there. But the next one I found interesting because it's all about transparency. So let me play this clip for you.
Constantine Torben with military.com. So one of the sort of key criticisms, I think, around this issue from the hearing yesterday was government transparency, lack of government transparency. I mean, can you sort of speak to that critique and whether you feel that AARO is being overly secretive, if you guys are working on being more transparent, sort of address this criticism from the Hill that you guys are emblematic of a government that overly classifies everything?
Yeah, it's an understandable concern, and I can make a comment. My wife would like me to share more about the UAP incidents too, but I guess it's on the record now. So the fundamental issue is that AARO receives cases from our partners, and in most cases, to date, because we've been working through the services, those partners are providing data that is gathered from sensitive platforms, and we need to make sure that we're protecting sensitive sources, methods, not introducing vulnerabilities to their operations. So even though that there's nothing inherently classified about the existence of a UAP, we have to protect that information. When AARO receives those interesting cases, the cases that we're just briefly talking about, we try to identify if the UAP information can be isolated from the sensitive, usually it's metadata that identifies characteristics of the platform. And we work to downgrade that material as much as we can. But we can't do it unilaterally. It has to be in partnership with the folks that brought that information. That is a very deliberate process, as you can imagine, to make sure that we're not releasing sensitive information. So we have taken significant steps to speed that up. We've hired a number of declassification experts. We're going to be hosting a declassification workshop so we can make sure we're implementing best practices from across the DoD and the IC. All of that takes more time than I think the public would like for it to take, but AARO is working on it. We recognize that the types of cases that I was just talking about are, from my perspective, true anomalies, and we're going to need significant scientific rigor to address those. And yes, the U.S. government has a lot of nice scientists, a little bias there, but we're going to need the help of academia and the public to address some of these. So we need to build that more transparent partnership.
So promising to learn there from Dr. John Kosloski that they're going to be implementing these declassification workshops. My pushback would be that's what you should have rolled out from day one, because Avril Haines has stated numerous times over the last several years, even dating back to I think 2021 or 2020, early 2022, that overclassification is a huge problem for national security. It's a plague. Everything is, there's excessive overclassification of information. So why didn't Kirkpatrick look at introducing these declassification workshops from day one? Because this is an area that John Greenwald Jr. has voiced his concerns over for quite some time now, and I share the concerns that he has, because a lot of times AARO is essentially applying this blanket denial on FOIA requests for AARO's case reports, or even and photographic and video footage. Often this exemption B7 of the Freedom of Information Act is being applied, which is basically, so you know what that is, and I've written it down so I could remind myself. B7 is aimed at preventing prejudicial pretrial publicity that could impair a court proceeding, protects records or information compiled for law enforcement purposes, the disclosure of which would deprive a person of a right to a fair trial or an impartial adjudication. I don't understand that. Why are all of AARO's cases being stamped with this B7 exemption? And here is a classic example. So I went after, I consulted with John and went after some of AARO's reports. This was dating back to, this is 15th of June of last year. Let me just, and basically I went after, a number of, I think 5 of AARO's case reports. And basically they came back and said the initial denial authority of the Office of Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security has determined that the documents withheld in their entirety pursuant to, in this instance, B1, which pertains to information that is currently and properly classified in the interest of national security. Also, the remaining portions are exempt per B5 inter and intra-agency memoranda, which are deliberative in nature. This exemption is appropriate for internal documents which are part of the decision-making process and contain subjective evaluations, opinions, and recommendations. And then B7, which could reasonably be expected to interfere with enforcement proceedings. B7E, which would disclose techniques and procedures for law enforcement investigations or prosecutions, or would disclose guidelines for law enforcement investigations or prosecutions if such disclosure could reasonably be expected to risk circumvention of law. I don't understand why a law enforcement proceeding exemption is being applied to a lot of these FOIA requests. And this is what John has voiced his concerns over time and time again, because they're abusing this use of this B7 exemption to kind of just blanket deny everything and not release anything through FOIA. And so that's an example of that. But let me now show you. I'll just turn my my banner off here. A video that really, I think, hits home the excessive secrecy and overclassification of information that plagues the UA topic. And this is from Michael Schellenberger's testimony at the House hearing, the House Committee's hearing on UAP, UAP exposing the truth. And I think Michael Schellenberger really hit home some key points here that kind of support the concerns and frustrations that John Greenwald Jr. has voiced for quite some time. So here we go.
A leading UAP researcher who utilizes the Freedom of Information Act to find out what the government knows, John Greenwald, told me last year that the U.S. government had been increasingly denying his request for UAP information. He has been doing FOIA requests for 27 years and has an archive of 3 million pages. The government has for decades denied any interest in UFOs, he told me, but the documents that he has assembled show that behind the scenes, it was a completely different story. Contrary to the hopes of many advocates of transparency, the government has been restricting more information since the leak of 3 UAP videos in 2017. The DoD organization AARO has been labeling many documents with a B7 exemption, which Greenwald says does not make any sense. They're stating that anything AARO does is involved in law enforcement investigation, which allows AARO to not release it. Greenwald says that the DoD has denied the existence of a UAP and ATIP-related records on multiple occasions, only to acknowledge them after an appeal was filed. He added that the Naval Air Systems Command in March 2022 stated they found no additional UAP videos. It seemed strange that they had 3 and only those 3, but other requests had been filed by the Black Vault, that's John Greenwald's group, to seek out more places UAPs might be hiding. Then in September 2022, the Navy admitted that the UAP-related videos and photographs existed, but denied the request in full for their release, saying that the requested videos contain sensitive information that are classified and exempt from disclosure. The DoD will deny things on a Monday and then admit to it on a Friday, said Greenwald. He said the government can and does release videos that protect secret methods of capturing it. They fall back on the sensitive platform excuse a lot, he said. However, the on-screen information can be blurred and scrubbed. The metadata can be removed. I'll show you this example here. This is a presentation from the UATP task force. This is completely absurd. It's nuts, this level of censorship, of redaction on a document. It shows the redaction of how many reports they've collected, for how many years. 2 of the 3 potential explanations are blacked out. The Pentagon, the intelligence community is treating us like children. It's time for us to know the truth about this. I think that we can handle it.
Perfectly said from Schellenberger. And remember, it wasn't all that long ago that common UAP shapes was completely classified. That was redacted. That wasn't even revealed. You had a whole blank page on a FOIA document that John got, and common shapes was completely blacked out. Now you have that information obviously being disclosed by AARO, but it's ridiculous. The number of reports, common explanations. Why is that information so secret? Why can that not be disclosed? And again, the point that Schellenberger made about this ridiculous B7 exemption, using some law enforcement exemption to do a blanket denial on FOIA requests. And I was really pleased to hear Schellenberger, highlight the good work that John has done and continues to do for several decades now with FOIA. I mean, just look at the archive of documents that he's been able to amass and keep within the Black Vault. And so I'll play this next clip for you because not many may have seen it. And it's really just, with great respect for what John Greenwald Jr. has done through FOIA to date, and he's certainly helped me throughout my understanding of FOIA, and I'm still a student of FOIA to this day, and a lot of the stuff that I've been able to secure for release through FOIA is because of the learnings that I've been privileged to be on the receiving end from John. So it was really nice to see Schellenberger pay this level of credit to the good work that John Greenwald Jr. does when he sat down with Jesse Michaels of the American Alchemy podcast. This was after the House hearing. So I'll play this for you, for those of you that haven't seen it.
Is underappreciated, and in part because I think he's a little bit like neither fish nor fowl. He's not someone that endorses the NHI hypothesis. At the same time, he says it is a possibility. For me, I thought that his work needed to be highlighted a little bit here because he has established that the secrecy has been growing, not declining. There's one story in the UAP community that sort of says that we are in the midst of disclosure. He says, no, that's not the case at all, that we're actually having less disclosure than we have in the past. I think that is important because I think it undermines the idea that this is all, either hopeful or not hopeful, but it undermines the idea that we're sort of on our way. I think that Greenwald is also important for pointing out the inconsistencies in the claims made by the Pentagon and the military. There's a great quote from him, which is they'll say one thing on Monday and they say something else on Friday. Yep. So, on the issue of the videos, there's some complexity to it, but basically after some of these videos were released, the Pentagon said, yeah, there's no more videos, just those 3 videos. And then he was like, well, really? And then a different branch then said, well, there's other videos, but we're not going to release them. So he also has established that there's other videos that they won't release for national security reasons. The final thing that's important about Greenwald is he noticed that they are justifying secrecy under a law enforcement provision rather than just national security. And that is very suspicious because if it's true, then we should know what the law enforcement investigations are, at least the members of Congress should. But if it's possible that they're also just abusing that, then we're just seeing, I held up, at one moment, the redactions, because it's just so absurd that they're redacting how long they've been collecting reports, how many reports they have, and what UAPs could be, as though there's not already a lot of speculation about what UAPs could be. It's really as though they don't want to admit for some reason that they are considering the more freaky hypotheses. Yes. Because they don't want to give it legitimacy, but that's just not how it works. People don't become less suspicious when there's censorship. They become more suspicious. Absolutely. So if you don't want conspiracy, theorizing, right, then you should release more information.
So perfectly well said. And there's less transparency today on the UAP topic than there has been ever in the past. So you're actually getting less information today because of all of these, heavily redacted documents and so on. You got obviously more FOIA requests being submitted, but a lot less information coming back. So it was, again, just wanted to play that clip as a way of kind of paying respect to the good work that John has done there. So let me play this last clip for you from the off-camera media roundtable. And then we're going to get to the good stuff, which is jumping into the Senate hearing chaired by Kirsten Gillibrand and listen to a few key talking points from new AARO Director John Kosloski and his testimony. So let's have a look at our last clip, which is talking about the stigma that's associated with reporting.
Thanks for doing this. Moshe Games with NBC. You said earlier that there wasn't evidence that UAP activity was linked to foreign adversaries. I'm wondering, have you seen any kind of suggestion that foreign adversaries have been trying to capitalize off of this with disinformation or anything else?
We have not, but I am concerned that somebody could use the potential stigma and take advantage of that. If there is a stigma associated with reporting UAP, then that's an opportunity for the adversary to maybe conduct collection operations and not have folks report on it, but we haven't seen evidence of that yet.
So that is particularly important for Australia because, and I won't spoil it, but let me play this clip from Ross Coulthart. This was in October of last year, and it really hits home this point.
A guy contacted me who was an F-35 pilot inside the Australian Air Force, and I'm probably revealing that he's one of a couple of dozen guys in that conversation, but he wanted me to know that he'd seen anomalous phenomena. And I said to him, will you report this to your bosses? Because they're saying that they've got no evidence. And he said, what do you think? What do you think somebody like me should do when the head of my Air Force is telling a parliamentary committee that there is no evidence? He said, I'm getting the message that I shouldn't come forward with that evidence. This is the problem, is that there needs to be a free, open, transparent, unpressurized airing of this evidence, because there are so many people out there who want to provide evidence who feel intimidated about doing so.
There you go. So that I think that is one of the true risks or true potential threats to national security is not reporting, and the fact that stigma can be taken advantage of and exploited by foreign adversaries, as Dr. John Kosloski just stated there. And he talks about that a little bit more in his congressional testimony before Kirsten Gillibrand's Senate Armed Services Subcommittee. So we'll come to that in just a moment. But those were pretty much the clips that I wanted to play for you from the off-camera media roundtable. So what we might do now is we'll get into the good stuff, which is jumping on over to now the new AARO Director, Dr. John Kosloski's testimony before the Senate Armed Services Subcommittee for emerging threats, and I can't remember the rest of the name, but so this was this was the frame that a lot of folks saw when they were watching the hearing from the Senate Armed Services Committee's official website. But for many others that were watching it on television or other networks, this was the view that they saw, with someone giving a little bit of side eye and evil eye in the background. And I think this image, which is now embedded in it's burnt into our brains, it really sums it up, because it really just paints a picture that, Susan Gough has basically a dog on a leash, and, she's keeping a close eye on the new boy, Dr. John Kosloski. And when I saw this, it was doing the rounds on social media. I think a lot of the comments about Susan Gough's appearance were unfair and unwarranted, but it did make me think. This imagery made me think of two movies that I'm a big fan of, and I won't spoil it. I did put it on X, so if you've seen it, it'll probably come as no surprise, but I'll play it for you. So if it gives you a chuckle, this is what I was thinking when I saw this image plastered on social media.
The department is committed to declassifying and publicly sharing more information on UAP.
I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want. But what I do have are a very particular set of skills. Skills I've acquired over a very long career. Skills that make me a nightmare for people like you. If you tell the people what you know about UAP, I will look for you. I will find you. And I will kill you.
So just a little bit of T2 and Taken action there. Everyone loves Liam Neeson's voice. How can you not love it? So, but I digress. A little bit of humor to kind of lighten it up for you. Let's just have a look very briefly at, I know some comments have come through, so I'll bring them up, but I'll just pull up for you. If you haven't looked at the video from the Senate Armed Services, Senate Armed Services Committee, Subcommittee on Emerging Threats and Capabilities, open and closed hearing to receive testimony on the activities of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. So I've put the link in the description below. If you want to watch it in its entirety, a whopping 35 minutes, feel free. You'll probably be able to get through it very, very quickly over a cup of coffee. So I'm going to play for you a couple of clips from the hearing of Dr. John Kosloski's testimony. Before I do, though, just a couple of comments I want to pull up on screen. Yes, I agree with you, Jimmy. It was great to see John get a shout out from Schellenberger and LiDAR Anomalies. It is so cool that they reference Greenwald's work. It should be cool to see him in a hearing sometime in the near future. He'd certainly have I reckon he'd have a lot of commentary to certainly share. He certainly knows a lot more about the excessive secrecy and overclassification of information on this topic than anyone that I know. Chili Farm Brisbane, yeah, Schellenberger was on Sky News and said nothing about it. Spoke about misinformation bill, though. He's been in Australia recently doing a lot of work on, that's his other censorship, I guess, is his other thing he's working on, not just on the UAP topic, trying to reduce censorship, but also censorship in general, and particularly in Australia. Let's see. Plant where it says in LiDAR, in response to LiDAR, yes, particularly in a hearing where hostile witnesses are summoned by means of subpoena. Chili Farm Brisbane, Senator Fawcett has a very interesting backstory. Raf Ciccone is chair of PJCIS and DFAT. I sent a letter to his office a while back. Do you think I got a response? Nothing. Donut. A little bit of a chuckle from Short Order Cook there. One, glad you like that video. She's the emperor watching over her little one. Very true. Yeah, Terminator Neeson. That's a good one. I like that. I like it very well. And Chili Farm Brisbane goes on to say, and Greg Moriarty has been Australian Defence Secretary since 2017, about the same time James Clapper came to Australia to work as distinguished advisor to the ANU, Australian National University. Very good point. Very good point. So let's now jump into the first clip, which is Kirsten Gillibrand's. So she was chairing the hearing. Her opening comments, some of her opening comments that I think are quite relevant. So we'll talk about it on the other side.
When unidentified anomalous phenomenon enter our airspace, we need to know about it. We need to identify it, but in order to do that, we need to reduce the stigma and credibility challenges associated with these events. Our service members, scientists, foreign partners, and the general public need to know that their reporting, research, and analysis will be taken seriously and acted on in good faith. In the spirit of transparency, AARO recently released a Consolidated Annual Report just a few months after releasing the first volume of the Historical Record Report in March of this year. These public documents help highlight the challenges still facing this office, including the lack of timely and actionable censor data, the need to revisit cases placed in the active archive, and the importance of improving reporting sources, both in the interagency and internationally.
So if AARO still hasn't got it right yet from a stigma standpoint and reporting standpoint, and the US now has mandatory reporting procedures, what are the chances that Australia's existing, and I quote, existing defense procedures and mechanisms already enable the reporting of all aerial unidentified anomalous phenomena? What are the chances that those mechanisms in place that Australia have are sufficient? I would argue that they're not. If AARO is still struggling with stigma and reporting, Australia is got a long way to go. Unfortunately, we're still a good decade or so behind the US. We're sadly where the US was in 2004 after the Nimitz incidents. The Tic Tac, wasn't taken seriously. Reporting was, you got even, range fouler reports had to be submitted. You have HAZREP reports being submitted by Ryan Graves and his squadron in 2015 because these observations of UAP weren't being taken seriously. And so let me just hit home the point for you there with a document that I was able to secure for release through the Freedom of Information Act. If I just pull this into view for you, I want to make sure I got the right one. Where is it? Back to 2. So if we go back to this document, defense does not have a specific policy governing the reporting or recording of unidentified anomalous phenomena by either members of the public or defense members. It relies on existing reporting mechanisms. Existing defense procedure and mechanisms, third dot point, already enable the reporting of all aerial unidentified anomalous phenomena. There are well-established procedures utilized by military and civilian air traffic controllers and air crew for the management and reporting of airspace infringements. Well, I talked about this in last month's live stream, and why would someone want to come forward and report? One, when there's still a degree of stigma and ridicule that's associated with the topic. You have commentary there a few minutes ago from Ross Coulthart saying that F-35 pilots don't even want to come forward because they're, seeing how folks like the Chief of Air Force, who aren't even bothering to be briefed on the topic, despite the briefings being delivered on the Chinese spy balloon and shoot down unidentified aerial objects. You've got Penny Wong interjecting in a Senate estimates and asking, is this a UFO question? Like, there's just still, stigma, unfortunately, is alive and well within the halls of government and the Defense Force. Why would someone want to come forward and volunteer their report when it's not going to be taken seriously? They have the potential to be ridiculed or have a black dot placed against their profile. And what happens to their report? It goes nowhere because there's no investigatory body that investigates reports of UAP. Now, certainly, UAP could be foreign adversarial systems, and that falls within the remit of the intelligence community. But it's the ones that are at the front line that are really suffered a disservice here. Men and women that are in the Royal Australian Air Force, that are in the skies, defending our airspace, those in the Navy, the Army, even those guys that are on the front lines, they've got no reporting mechanisms or procedures in place whatsoever. It's fine to have the intelligence community, assessing, UAP if they're foreign adversarial threats, but just ignore the guys at the front line. Don't worry about them. They're the ones that are seeing things. The F-35 pilots, the guys seeing stuff, and they're not reporting it. And that's the real national security threat, in my opinion. So let's now move on to the next video from the Senate hearing. This is now Dr. John Kosloski talking about partnerships. And I was listening intently with his testimony here and was sadly disappointed.
When unidentified anomalous phenomenon enter our airspace, we need to know about it. We need to identify it, but in order to do that, we need to reduce the stigma.
My apologies, folks. That's the one we've just played. Let me just get rid of it. This is the one we're after.
To accomplish AARO's national security mission, I have set 3 priorities for the office: building strong partnerships, promoting transparency, and scaling up the work of the office. AARO cannot do its work alone. Building partnerships across government, academia, industry, and with the public is essential to the success of the office. Strong cooperation with the military services is particularly important. We rely on their support to implement our reporting guidance and to amplify the message that there should be zero stigma associated with UAP reporting. We also rely on partnerships with the national labs, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, FBI, Department of Homeland Security, NASA, all of which play a role in the whole of government effort to address UAP. Recognizing the talent and expertise that reside outside of the government, AARO will continue to explore new ways to partner with the academic and scientific communities to investigate its most complex UAP cases.
Where's the international engagement? What about AARO's congressional mandate to coordinate with allies and partners of the United States to better understand the extent and nature of UAP. There was a couple of sentences about engagement with foreign partners in AARO's annual report, but there was no questions asked in the hearing by Kirsten Gillibrand. Why? That's a huge missed opportunity. This is where I was really disappointed with Kirsten Gillibrand's efforts, because and granted, she may have asked this question in a closed session, but you would think that now that we all know about the Five Eyes inaugural UAP caucus working group meeting, at least there would be some commentary providing an update on AARO's efforts across the Five Eyes or international engagement. Because again, the legislation states that AARO's mandate is coordinating with allies and partners of the United States as appropriate to better assess the nature and extent of unidentified aerial phenomena. No question asked about international engagement. The only breadcrumb that we got from John Kosloski was in that off-camera media roundtable where he talks about ramping up and broadening international engagement in 2025. Why wasn't a question about that asked by Kirsten Gillibrand? Again, really disappointing that she didn't ask that question. And again, and proof of that, if we pull up, I'll just go back to my, the document we saw about, actually, and I won't, in AARO's report, it talks about, AARO executes a strategic partner engagement program conducting outreach and liaison activities with foreign partners in support of AARO's UAP mission. Why weren't there any questions asked about that? Again, I think a real missed opportunity, sadly. And we all know how hard it was to try and get information about the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. Again, it was like trying to get blood from a stone. Australia denied even attending, and then, oh yeah, less than 6 months later, sorry guys, we got it wrong, we did attend. They either grossly incompetent and or deceptive. I wouldn't be surprised if a combination of the two. So anyway, let's move away from that. That's my gripe. I'm going to now show you another clip that was played, another clip from the hearing. This is now Kosloski again talking about transparency, much like he did in that off-camera media roundtable.
A related priority for AARO is transparency. Our ability to collaborate with key partners, including the scientific community and the public, relies on information sharing, to include downgrading and declassifying UAP-related information. In some cases, it may be unclear to the public why the DoD classified a piece of information in the first place. Why are photos of seemingly benign objects such as balloons classified? It's often the case that an object or phenomenon isn't itself a security concern, but the location, source, or method used to capture it is still sensitive. Many cases are difficult to quickly release to the public, but are reported to the appropriate committees in Congress that are authorized by law or House and Senate leadership to receive the information. It is important to note that AARO does not unilaterally declassify information. Instead, we work with the originator of a classified record to ensure that declassifying that record does not inadvertently harm national security. This can take time. Nonetheless, the department is committed to declassifying and publicly sharing more information on UAP while protecting sensitive sources and methods.
Well, promising that the goal is to share more information, disclose more information. But again, these declassification workshops should have been something that AARO made a priority from day one, because I think the lack of transparency and the lack of, again, just the fact that there's a massive community of people that follow this topic on Twitter and X, and that AARO didn't bother to use a huge platform at its disposal, its X account. So they're certainly that lack of public trust does not come as any surprise, because they haven't really been as transparent as they could be with a lot of this information. I'm going to talk about transparency a bit already, but there is another clip coming up that we'll talk about it as well. So let me show you. We'll jump into this next clip, which is about AARO's efforts on restoring public trust.
Widely reported that individuals claiming first-hand knowledge of unreported UAP programs have been reluctant to engage with AARO. What message do you have for those individuals, and how will you work to gain their trust?
I would let them know that Congress has gone out of its way to create the organization AARO specifically to conduct these sorts of investigations, and has uniquely empowered them to have access to all UAP-related information, whether that's historic or current. And we take that responsibility and those authorities very seriously. And so we have been reaching out to a broader community, encouraging folks who had talked to AARO personnel in the past and maybe felt uncomfortable to come back to us. We've met with several of their interlocutors and a couple of firsthand witnesses, and we are making great progress, and those firsthand witnesses that we have talked to do feel comfortable coming back to us. And so we hope that more folks that do have information would go to www.aaro.mil, fill out the form, send it to us so we can bring them in for interviews and add their information to our investigations.
So I know there's people will kind of take his comments there with a grain of salt. However, I did find it interesting to learn that AARO has actually asked whistleblowers to come back and talk to them, particularly if they didn't feel comfortable with their their initial testimony. So is that kind of like an attempt, a sign that, out with the old, in with the new, and AARO is trying to rebrand itself as AARO 2.0 under Kosloski's leadership, and as a gesture of good faith, show that yes, we're open to we're keen to be more open in receiving your testimony and be more respectful of your testimony and in the way that we receive and provide you with feedback on the testimony you've given, because you've heard from some folks that said that they went before AARO, they disclosed their information, they got a memorandum for record come back that was kind of a shitty summary of what they disclosed, and when they signed off on it, they never got any follow-up from AARO. So again, a missed opportunity for Kirsten Gillibrand here. I covered this in a live stream a couple months back. I think the title was, "Will David Grusch Meet with the New AARO Director?" And so I would have loved to have seen Kirsten Gillibrand ask John Kosloski in this hearing if he has sat down with David Grusch. If so, what information can you provide? When did that take place, and so on? How long? There's no problem with revealing that information. And if you haven't, will you, Dr. John Kosloski, commit to addressing David Grusch's concerns in writing that he expressed in an email to AARO personnel back in November 2023? Because David Grusch never received any assurances from AARO that it was cleared to receive all of his classified testimony in its entirety. And so that would have been a question I would have loved to have seen her ask, and publicly provide, ask the AARO director, will you make a commitment to doing what a key whistleblower, or in this case, David Grusch, has requested that he needs in order to feel comfortable and confident that he can come before AARO and disclose what he knows, and not be fearful that he is breaking some security oath, because AARO doesn't have the necessary clearances. AARO is saying it has all the clearances it needs, but David Grusch wasn't satisfied with that paragraph, that AARO included its annual report. So, because if whistleblowers don't trust AARO enough to come forward, and you've also got, coupled with that, the House Oversight Committee that is charged with exercising oversight and investigating allegations of fraud, waste, and abuse, like David Grusch testified to. And they are yet to sit down with David Grusch in a skiff and receive his classified testimony. Well, that's what you call a stalemate in chess. We're at an impasse. We've got a huge problem where people don't trust AARO to come forward, and the people that have had whistleblowers come forward, aren't cleared to hear their testimony in its entirety, namely the House Oversight Committee. So I think that's a huge problem. And yeah, I agree with you, LIDAR Anomalous. Can't believe they still haven't got Grusch into a skiff. It's ridiculous. The congressional body that's charged with investigating allegations of fraud, waste, and abuse and exercising oversight can't do its job because it can't get Grusch in a skiff to hear his classified testimony. I think that's a disgrace. That's a huge problem. So think of it what you will, but let's jump on to the next clip, because this one I had a few comments around, the overclassification of information that plagues the UAP topic.
Growing concern and interest in UAPs, how do you balance the need for the transparency that our public is demanding with the potential risks of revealing classified defense information?
Yeah, that's always a concern that's on the front of our minds. We want to make sure that we're deconflicting both on potential U.S. programs and what the IC might be tracking for adversarial programs as we're aggregating that information and preparing to share it. However, oftentimes we can remove the discussion of the unidentified and anomalous activity from the sensitive information that our partners are concerned with. And that's usually going to be the platforms that the information was collected with, if it is a truly anomalous. And so we have our partners working alongside in the declassification of that data.
So the issue that I have with that testimony there is, and he's talking about, the top secret sensitive platforms and sensor assets that are capturing a lot of this data. It's not that the UAP is classified, it's that the systems and sensors and platforms that were collected on was classified. Well, but it's perfectly okay for the Pentagon to release, and not that this is obviously classified tech that's capturing this, but release cockpit footage from a U-2 of the Chinese spy balloon, or MQ Reaper 9 drone footage, which is a classified platform with classified sensors of Russian fighter jets dousing the MQ-9 Reaper drone with fuel, or you have foreign fighters splitting US fighter jets down the middle when they're flying in formation. These are all recent things that we've seen and footage that we've seen. So there's this kind of hypocrisy. It's okay for the Pentagon to release that because it fits the strategic narrative of the Pentagon when it's all about highlighting Russia's aggression and so on. But when it comes to UAP, they'll be quick to say, "Oh no, the systems, the platforms, the sensors are all classified, so we can't reveal any information." Yet you've got no problems with scrubbing information on with other footage that has been released. So it's a bit of a frustrating double-edged sword there, I think, with that response. Let's jump to the next clip. This is now John Kosloski talking about reducing stigma and having persistent reporting. And again, if AARO is struggling with stigma and reporting, there isn't this consistent, persistent reporting, then what bloody chance? You've got Nunn and Buckley's chance of Australia of getting it right with current existing, reporting protocols on incidents and accidents and near misses and things. It's clearly not sufficient if AARO can't even get it straight. So let's have a look at this clip.
Having to explain the UAP, what do we need to begin really doing about them? What precautions can we take? What should we be doing about them?
I think that removing the stigma, reducing the stigma is the first step. We need to make sure that we're having honest and transparent conversations about them, because if we're hesitant to discuss them, then it opens the opportunity for an adversary, as you had mentioned earlier, Senator Gillibrand, to come in and conduct some activity. So we need to do that, and we need to have more persistent monitoring and understand that whether it is a UAP or a counter-UAS issue, that we need to have that complete domain awareness around our national security facilities.
So take note, Australian Department of Defence and Royal Australian Air Force, AARO just laid it out for you there in black and white. And, I won't I won't make any other comments above and beyond what Dr. John Kosloski said there. I'm mindful of the time that everyone's given me today, so we will look at some comments, but I do want to just jump through these last couple of videos that I've got. And there's only a couple more. We're at, I think, the second last one of this hearing, and this is talking about the, at the moment, significant issue that the US is having, and in the UK, with drones, with UAS, unmanned aerial systems, and how AARO can support. And this kind of goes to the question that Ryan Sprague asked at the very front end of this live stream about the UAS issue, drone issue, and what can AARO do to support.
Follow-up questions. We didn't discuss in this setting the most recent UAP or UAS encounter with bases like Langley. I know that the incursion by UASs that were publicly made available through the press that took over 2 weeks was fairly alarming to senators because there was a question about what technology they were using. There was a question about why it was so hard to detect. Can you speak to how AARO will be integrated into the review of these kinds of cases and how you can be helpful to both the intelligence community and the Department of Defense in analyzing or being able to more quickly analyze what's knowable and what's not knowable, so that, because once you do identify it as a drone, for example, it then goes to the right department at DOD or the intelligence community to assess, deal with, or take down as the incident might be. But to talk to us a little bit about what role you can play for both the DOD and the IC community in these kinds of incursions that are happening when we don't know what tech is being used and we don't understand a flight pattern, or we don't understand how they arrive and depart in the way they do.
Yeah, we are generally going to be supporting them through an advisory capacity as an organization that naturally needs to conduct baseline experiments of the environment to see what normal looks like, whether it's balloons, birds, anomalous activity, or drones flying through an environment. We're going to gather a lot of data that will allow us to characterize an environment very well and then detect and follow those tracks, hopefully rather efficiently. There's also a lot of overlap in the type of sensors that are going to be used for the counter-UAS mission and the UAP mission, whether that's active detection like radars or passive like cameras. And so as AARO is trying to push the bounds on detectability for UAP, we're hopefully going to have best practices that we can also provide to the counter-UAS, and potentially we might have additional technologies that we can offer them to support.
So certainly, it sounds like AARO can offer some valuable contributions to the conversation there, and really support in an advisory capacity, as the sensor stacks that they'll be creating will obviously be of benefit to detecting UAS activity. And so while the US has got some massive problems with drone activity at the moment, and now the UK and these US Air Force bases, it doesn't mean that Australia isn't immune. And I'm not 100% clear on what the current deterrent mechanisms that the Australian Defence Force have in place with UAS, with drone technology, but certainly Australia is not immune to drone incursions. And I'll give you a case in point. A case was shared with me. This is going back a couple of years now. Let me show this for you on screen. So this is, it's very hard to see, my apologies. I wasn't given a very high res copy, but so there is a critical infrastructure facility located in the Middle Arm Industrial Precinct in Darwin. And between January, February, March, and April of 2021, there were reports of, particularly in April, between the 1st and the 30th of April, it's only the 1st, 5th, and 6th indicated of the last 3 bullet points, but there were reports of a large unknown car bonnet size, unidentified object, unidentified aerial system, potentially UAS drone, larger than a normal drone, obviously a it's pretty decent car bonnet size, exhibiting unauthorized aircraft movements around the Darwin airspace. And these are the logs. And there is some information that's been redacted, but it says the last 3 bullet points, I'll read it to. Additionally, over the Easter long weekend, the following events occurred. I think it's 3rd of April 2021 at 3 a.m. Drone observed flying from in a westerly direction north of somewhere approximately 30 meters off the ground. It was identified. Drone was large, possibly enterprise grade. 5th of April, drone observed flying approximately 20 meters above sea level on eastern boundary and over redacted. 6th of April, drone observed flying over eastern side of redacted. And then it says, of note, for the occurrences over Easter weekend was a description of the drone having an independent spotlight operating on it and the size appearing larger than a recreational drone. So, this was not picked up on radar. It was not responded to by air traffic control in Darwin, which is operated by the RAF. From what has been communicated to me, and so the current guidance, because the Royal Australian Air Force, Australian Department of Defence doesn't have any recording protocols in place. Does the Chief of Air Force consider call the cops basically the appropriate response in this instance when you've got a drone that's operating with impunity in airspace that beneath it is critical infrastructure, a critical infrastructure facility, whether it be gas, oil, pipeline, whatever it might be. So is call the cops an appropriate response, particularly that the Northern Territory Police Air Wing is a non-investigative unit and thus has no airborne capability to respond? So, the current guidance of, call the cops, she'll be right, mate, is kind of grossly inadequate and represents a real potential weakness and gap that could be exploited by potentially a foreign adversary. So a little bit off topic on the UAP conversation, but I think, Australia, there certainly needs to be an awareness that Australia is not immune to the issues that have plagued the US as of late, now in the UK, with these UAS, these drone incursions. So that was just interesting. Very last clip that I'll play for you from this briefing, or I should say the hearing with Dr. John Kosloski, was the final question that Kirsten Gillibrand asked the new AARO director. Is there anything AARO needs?
Question is there anything that you need to tell the Senate that you need from us, whether it's funding, whether it's support, whether it's legislation? Is there any requests that AARO has of us or anything else you need to brief us on for us to be able to do our jobs to protect our service members, as well as integrate public interest and public data and information into the future analysis efforts of AARO?
So first of all, I want to say thank you again. I think that the authorities that we have are remarkable, and I think that we are well-resourced as an office. The only ask that I would have is that you continue to champion us, particularly with witnesses, encourage them to come forward and report to us so that we can have a more fulsome investigation of the potential historic or ongoing legacy programs.
Well, forget encouragement. How about providing some assurances to whistleblowers and protections? Because they're the two things that we're hearing time and time again. David Grusch wants an assurance that AARO is cleared to receive his testimony. We're hearing, from other folks that whistleblowers are fearful to come forward and they want whistleblower protections. We've even heard James Lakatsky and Colin Kelleher talk about that recently. So there are a couple of things that Congress, Kirsten Gillibrand, your subcommittee could do, is to champion, like Tim Burchett was trying to do, champion, prospective whistleblower legislation so that more witnesses and whistleblowers would be prepared to come forward. So a couple of comments that have come through. That was the final clip there, folks. Ducati Girl, doesn't imbue much confidence in AARO. I would certainly agree with you there based on the the testimony from the new AARO director. Follow-up comment. Seems lots of people think Trump will shake things up, yet not a fan, so we'll see, I guess. Yeah, unfortunately, I think with Trump, what Trump says and what Trump does are often two very different things. So hopefully we'll kind of be surprised. We'll have some surprise and delight, and we'll see him actually get some stuff done on the UAP topic. LiDAR Anomalies response to Ducati Girl. If Nancy Mace would spend less time on X hanging up signs on congressional bathrooms and more time holding hearings on UAP, and maybe less time selling merch that has UAP on it and getting witnesses in the skiffs, that would be a good thing. I do agree. Jimmy's comments, will Trump be true to his word on this topic? I'll release those files, have to release those files. Yep, like I said, what he says and does are often two very different things. Chili Farm, Brisbane, your comments based on, we're talking about drones there. See, they now include unidentified in the NOTAM, Notice to Air Men, I think is the acronym. NOTAM RAF, October or November 24 is online. I'll have to suss that out. Thanks for the tip on that. And Ducati Go, 100% grant protections are critical. So hope that's been of value, folks. We're kind of at the truth. I hope that's not the halfway mark. Yes, how it was being a dad. Tiring, early mornings, long days, trying to squeeze in time where I can for research and putting together of this content to provide recaps and updates. But love it. I'm enjoying being a big kid again and having a 4-year-old and a 6-month-year-old, 4-year-old girl and a 6-month-year-old boy. So a lot of fun. Just got to work on the dad bod. It's not as good as it could be, but we won't talk about that. So let's check in with the poll, folks. The poll, for YouTubers, the poll was, will the new AARO director restore public trust and AARO's reputation? Coming in at 4% of the vote. Yeah, I'm liking the new guy. So that one was a bit of a failure. Coming in at 28% of the vote. Dude, it's AARO. 32% of the vote. Not while Goff gives the evil eye, and at 36% of the vote and the winning vote, will the new AARO director restore public trust and AARO's reputation? And the winning vote, thank you, I needed a good laugh. So not many people having much trust in the new AARO director, but time will tell, and we'll see if he can distance himself and separate himself from his predecessor, Kirkpatrick. So at this juncture, folks, if you're just joining, please feel free to give the live stream a like at this juncture. Share it with family, friends, your social networks. Subscribe if you're new to the show, because now we're going to get into some fun stuff, which is segueing into, if I can just pull this up on screen. There we go. We will now jump into, make sure I've got the right screen. Oh, that was a poor segue, wasn't it? We're now going to jump into the rundown. So we'll just kind of recap some other news that's been happening on the UAP topic close to home and abroad. And we'll start things off with our good friends over at Channel 9, A Current Affair. To my surprise, put out a story. I only went for about 5.5 minutes, and thanks to Marie and Jimmy for flagging this with me. I wasn't aware of it until they let me know. I think it was just on last Saturday on A Current Affair. They actually did a really, I think, a good, respectable job of, it was kind of copy and paste journalism, but they did a really good, respectable job of covering the 2 recent hearings in the US, and including, obviously, you can see on this graphic, footage from Donald Trump's interview with Lex Friedman on Lex Friedman podcast about how he says, I will declassify, I have to declassify. So I'm not going to play the video because I don't want to be hit with a copyright strike, which I probably would if I played something from A Current Affair. But I will show you, I have added the link in the show notes below. So if you do want to watch that, I did post it on X because X is a little bit more liberal, but I have posted in the show notes below. There is an article that the A Current Affair put out It's also there for you to play the video, and you can kind of read through, talks about coverage of the two recent hearings. So again, pleasantly surprised that A Current Affair put out a respectable report. The reporter who covered the story and did the narration referred to it as anomalous. That's a new one. I hadn't heard of anomalous before. Couldn't quite get anomalous out. Maybe it was the very first time that he'd ever said the word. But nonetheless, good to see that A Current Affair is taking its reporting on this topic a little bit more seriously. And there was no X-Files theme in the report, which was good to see. So let's now talk about another bit of news closer to home. And that is this fella, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. So he was recently asked a question by, again, wonderful reporter journalist Brandy Vincent of Defense Scoop. He was asked a question about UAP, and I believe this is the first time he has ever been asked a question on UAP outside of a congressional hearing. So let me play this clip for you. And again, kudos to Brandy Vincent for having the gumption to ask this question.
I hope you're okay with this question. AARO Chief Dr. Kosloski testified on the Hill today about the open UAP cases. I was wondering if any briefings have reached you on that, and in your career, if you've seen UAP threaten national security and the progress that the office has made under.
So really hard to hear Brandy's question there, but asking about UAP, have you seen anything pertaining to UAP that is a threat to national security? What are your thoughts on the AARO office, asking questions about RAP and UAP in general?
Well, I've quite frankly, I've not seen any UAP incidents that I would categorize as threatening non-security. There are things that happen, that have happened, and probably will continue to happen that are difficult to explain. And so when we encounter things like that, we will go and investigate those things because whether it's some really unexplained phenomena or it's just something that is explainable, we just have to get to the root cause. We've organized our effort to ensure that we can methodically identify and assess these incidents. And I want to thank Congress for continuing to support us with the resources that we need to be effective.
So first time we've ever had Lloyd Austin on the record providing some commentary on UAP there. And so following his comments, I thought I would reach out or at least tweet at our good friend, Minister for Defense, Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles, and ask this question. A little bit hard to see, so I'm going to read it for you. The post was, the U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin on UAP. There are things that have happened, and probably will continue to happen that are difficult to explain. This is from his quote. And so when we encounter things like that, we will go and investigate those things, because whether it's some really unexplained phenomena or it's just something that is explainable, we just have to get to the root cause. So Richard Marles, given the importance your US counterpart has placed on better understanding the nature and extent of UAP, what is the Australian Department of Defence doing under your leadership to assess the potential national security threats and safety of flight risks that UAP pose in an Australian context? Have you even been formally briefed on UAP? If so, when? If not, why not? Because the documentation that I've received through FOIA and ministerial correspondence to date is that the Minister of Defence, as at last year, had not been briefed on UAP. Why? Why haven't you been briefed on UAP? Plausible deniability. You couldn't give us stuff. You're interested too much in other things. But what could be more important than national security threats and safety of flight risks that our US ally and Five Eyes partner is taking very seriously? So that was interesting. couple of comments that have come through. Jimmy, yes, the good old dad bod, the dad bod. That's the craze at the moment, but not for my wife, sadly. So we won't go there. Gareth, I would suggest to raise the profile of what is happening in the US is to jump on the ABC radio when given a chance to get this topic talked about. Well, funny you talk about ABC. We're going to talk about ABC in just a moment. Ducati girl, I just want to know whether greys would make good house pets and if they can cook. It's all about sources and methods. Actually, hang on. I think I've got an appropriate response for that one. Okay, moving on. Let's have a look at some of the other comments that have come through. Jimmy, husband, nightlife on ABC radio. If there was a radio program, would certainly love to hear it. We're going to talk about ABC in just a moment, though. Plant watering citizen, good one, Grant. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate. Oh, maybe it is new. Gareth says no. The 6:30 to 10 p.m. show last night. Interesting. If you've got a link or anything you can share in addition on that, Gareth, would be very interested to take a look at it and share the link. Put it maybe in the show note. The show notes so people can have a look at it. So let's have a look at another bit of news. Oh no, sorry, 7 to 10 p.m. he says. Okay, so let's jump on over to something else that's been happening. And again, this is really kind of starting to set the tone that maybe the Australian news media is starting to shift. There is a change in the tide of the Australian news media and how they're covering this topic, because there was some great articles put out by news.com.au. Frank Chung has put out 2 articles really in the last week. One was covering the House Committee hearing on UAP. US Congress hears claims of secret UAP crash programs, descriptions of alien craft. An 11-page alleged whistleblower report, which we know is Immaculate Constellation, has made wild claims about secret UFO programs and description of encounters with organic craft. And more recently, his coverage of the Senate hearing on UAP with Dr. John Kosloski, which we just covered. Very anomalous objects. Pentagon reveals bizarre UFO sightings under investigation. The head of the Pentagon's UFO investigation office has shared details of several strange encounters we can't explain in Senate testimony. I've since been in contact with Frank to provide him with some background information, and hopefully he will have an appetite to explore some coverage on Australia's lack of interest and engagement on the topic to date. So early days, obviously can't promise anything, but I would certainly be able to report back over time. And so let's just use that as a chance to, actually, I'll just pull up for you. I've put it again in the show notes below, the most recent article that Frank has put out. So if you're interested to read his article that he put out on the 21st of November about the Senate, John Kosloski's testimony, there's a brief video that you can watch and you can read his report as well. Again, does a really good job. I think he did a respectable job in covering the hearing. So kudos to you. My hat goes off to you, Frank, for exercising your due diligence and providing some respectful coverage. So let's now jump into what I really was quite excited to show and talk about tonight. And this is the truly wonderful podcast series that the ABC's Expanse podcast has just put out. Season 4 of Expanse is titled Uncropped. And again, I put the link in the show notes below. So if you haven't had a chance to have a look at this already, you can listen to it straight from the ABC Expanse's website. You can play all of the episodes. Wonderful job by ABC journalist Daniel O'Neill. Basically, there is how many episodes? There's 5 episodes, and I'll just read the I'll just read the description so you can get a sense as to what it looks like. So for those of you that haven't that don't know about it, so In 1966, a salt of the earth banana farmer in far north Queensland saw something he couldn't explain. It looked like a flying saucer, and it left behind a circular mark in some reeds, which he called a saucer nest. That moment became the inspiration for an international alien hoax, which is crop circle phenomenon in the UK. It subjected him to intense ridicule, and it exposed him to the whole chaotic debate about UFOs. Host Danielle O'Neill goes from a mosquito-laden lagoon in far north Queensland to the Australian government's classified UFO files to the US Congress as she seeks to understand what happened, its legacy, and why believable people say seemingly unbelievable things. The Expanse podcast explores big stories from across Australia, a vast continent where anything can happen. And Series 3 was truly wonderful as well, Spies in the Outback. It's all about Pine Gap. So that was a wonderful, that was a video series done on, available on YouTube. And I think I covered it in a recent live stream. So season 4 of the Expanse podcast Uncropped is also on Spotify. So if you prefer to listen to your podcast on Spotify, give it a listen there. Again, I was thoroughly impressed with the job that Danielle O'Neill did. I think she certainly covered it from a skeptical angle. You know, you could sense in her tone that she was quite skeptical, and healthy degree of skepticism, but she had some great folks that she was interviewing in all of these episodes from, well, I won't spoil it. Jeremy Corbell was one, but he was not the one that I was most interested to hear from. The one that I was most interested to hear from, and by the way, there is a great accompanying article on the ABC's website about the podcast series, The Cane Farm Crop Circles and an Enduring UFO Mystery by Chris Calcino and Danielle O'Neill for Expanse. 24th of November, came out a few days ago. I won't read through it. It's a really good article because it's interactive in the sense that it has multimedia throughout, so you can actually play audio commentary from some of the individuals that are interviewed in the podcast series. So, but we're going to focus on some of the clips from some of the episodes, and we're going to start with my good pal, so researcher that I truly respect and consider a mentor in a lot of respects. Australian veteran researcher Keith Basterfield was interviewed for the podcast and appears frequently throughout a few of the episodes. And so I'm going to play for you some of the clips from the season 4 of Expanse Uncropped. This is Keith Basterfield talking about, kind of setting it up for you, talking about the Royal Australian Air Force's historical involvement in the UAP topic, investigating UAP or UAS, which they referred to back then, unusual aerial sightings. So investigating those in decades past, and Keith's take on RAF's mindset based on their investigatory efforts. So let me play this for you. I'll put my little fair use banner. I know this is ABC's content, but we're educating the public and critiquing the content we're sharing. So enjoy this clip from Keith.
And the key organisation tasked with trying to tease all these reports apart and work out what was fact and what was fiction, or at least unverifiable, was the Department of Defence. More specifically, the Royal Australian Air Force, the RAF. Every report made, gathered up, noted down. George's strange experience filed alongside hundreds of others. And Keith? Well, he kept doing his own investigations and sent a bit of work the Air Force's way.
We had a relationship in South Australia, for example, with a lieutenant whose job was to collect UFO reports and to analyse them. We had several chats with him. He took us seriously.
Even so, as the years passed, Keith started to suspect the RAF was on a different page to him. There was this report he made. He documented 4 first-hand experiences, wrote it all up in a technical report, submitted it, and...
The Air Force explanation was igneous fatius, which is Latin for swamp gas. And we thought, come on, 5 people, 3 different vehicles, all reporting the same thing, seriously, swamp gas? And that's when we knew that the Air Force really wasn't interested in looking for any unconventional explanation amongst their own reports.
The dreaded swamp gas reappears after J. Allen Hynek referenced famously swamp gas, and now you have investigators for the Royal Australian Air Force using that as an explanation for an Australian case. And Keith is a diligent researcher and investigator, so I would take Keith's commentary there as a good sense as to what the mindset was of the RAF. They just wanted to explain away a lot of these instances. And you'll notice that he referenced an Air Force intelligence officer that was responsible for investigating these reports for the RAF. We're going to talk about that individual in just a moment. So that was Keith is featured in another clip that was in the podcast that I'll play. I'm not playing all of the clips because there's far too many to clip, but I'm just pulling out a few of them. And also, another wonderful veteran researcher, and again, one that I consider as a good mentor, is Bill Chalker. So Bill Chalker is also featured throughout season 4 of The Expanse Uncropped. And here are some comments from Bill Chalker in the episode, in one of the episodes. I'll set this up. Bill is basically talking about stigma and the risks that really scientists take when they form an interest in the UAP topic. It's really not a career builder if you take an interest in the topic. So this is Keith expounding on that.
That young, tanned, surfer-looking guy on the failed road trip, Bill Chalker, he was diving deep down the UFO rabbit hole. By the 80s, he was well on his way to becoming one of Australia's chief UFO researchers. Like Keith, Bill was just, how about some science?
Science should be about focusing and doing a careful examination of things, open inquiry.
But he knew all about the UFO eye roll.
During the 70s, I found out about a UFO sighting that occurred back in 1970. We went into this area and found a classic burnt area about 30 feet wide. It was a very clear-cut correlation with where this UFO had seemed to land.
Bill reached out to a scientist, explaining the intricacies of the case.
He said, sounded like a classic case, but you don't want to make that public. You're better off saying that you're interested in witchcraft than flying saucers. He knew that within the mainstream of the scientific research area, if you start to make yourself the focus of UFO inquiries, then it doesn't bode well for your ongoing scientific career path.
That's a really good point that Bill makes, and unfortunately, I think that stigma still exists in a lot of professions in the scientific and academic community, even in the profession of psychology. Unhidden recently put out a great article by an anonymous author that really talks how stigma still plagues the profession of psychology, and you are sort of starting to see more and more scientific and academic institutions take this topic seriously. Obviously, we all know about the Galileo Project, the SCU, Sol Foundation. You have there's a slew of other organizations that are now starting to take this topic seriously in both the academic and scientific world. So stigma still exists, unfortunately, probably always will, but at least you're getting scientists that are starting to look through the telescope like Galileo did. All those several hundreds of years ago, in the interest of curiosity and exploration and science. So here's another clip that from Bill Chalker in the Uncropped series. This is Bill talking about kind of the historical issues, the cultural issues with the term UFO, and how the media has typically shied away from the topic. But again, we now see in 2024 that's starting to change. You've got the Canberra Times put out 2 articles, courtesy of Jamison Murphy. You've got Frank Chung now with news.com.au. You've got a current affair, and now you've got the ABC, and there was another ABC podcast that was done not too long ago as well. So let me play this second clip for you from featuring Bill Chalker.
There's probably stuff out there we can't explain. But things like E.T. or the X-Files often mean that if we drop the clanger UFO, people fill in all these blanks with whatever cultural knowledge they have to hand.
Therein lies part of the problem. Unfortunately, a lot of it gets kind of minimalised and trashed by casual media engagement. There's something worthwhile that's been recurring that would benefit from serious scientific engagement.
So, Bill makes a good point, and I think we've seen that with the mainstream news media's lack of due diligence and courage to actually even ask questions on this topic, and hopefully we're now starting to see a changing of the guard and a shift in that thinking. I mean, if you think about it, if the media understood how popular and curious the general public is on the UAP topic, they would be covering a lot more frequently, like News Nation is doing. I mean, look how well it's doing. It's now seen as the news organization to kind of turn to for up-to-date reporting on this topic. And the New York Times is covering it less. They obviously, set the stage in 2017, but they really haven't done a whole lot in recent years. So let's move away from Bill, because I now want to introduce you to someone that's a little less known in the UFO topic in Australia, and that's this gentleman. A bit hard to see, but his name is Brett Biddington. He was the Air Force intelligence officer that was charged with investigating UAP or UAS reports for the Royal Australian Air Force. This was the gentleman that Keith Basterfield was referring to in his commentary from a couple of clips earlier. So let me play this clip for you that features Brett Biddington.
Over the years, Brett looked into dozens of reports. They largely turned out to be nothing more than weather or other mundane things. And the ones that were unexplained was usually because there wasn't enough information to come to a conclusion. So, nearing the end of the Cold War, Brett was under the squeeze from higher-ups. Basically, the call was that the RAF's money should go to fighting wars and stuff.
Unusual aerial sightings when there's no evidence of any threat that is extraterrestrial was not core business. The logic drove me to eventually recommend to the Chief of the Air Force that we desisted or no longer worried about unusual aerial sightings.
So that was it. Nothing to see here. It was case closed. To be clear, the RAF was the place to report unexplained sightings, the authority. So closing up meant closing up any official governmental investigative agency. Brett agrees there were some sightings he or the RAF couldn't explain. He just doesn't think they were that interesting.
You can't make the logic leap to say that because I can't explain it, what I'm seeing is a threat to national security.
There would be some people who say that those kind of sightings of unexplained things in the sky, by their kind of very nature, might be a risk to Air Force and aircraft and therefore be relevant to the RAF, and kind of then make the logic that that is a reason to keep investigating to understand them.
You can make that argument, but so far, to my knowledge, the Air Force has never lost an aircraft to an unexplained aerial object.
So why on earth would you wait for an aircraft to be taken down or to have a collision with an unidentified aerial object, or what we now call, unidentified anomalous phenomena? Moved away from unidentified aerial phenomena. why on earth would you wait for a tragedy to happen before implementing at least some sensible see something, say something reporting mechanisms for pilots and defense personnel? So, while I certainly respect Brett's opinion, and I've corresponded with him on a number of occasions, we've had some very thought-provoking and I've had some respectful thoughts from Brett, and I certainly respect his history with this topic and his commentary. But where I don't agree particularly with his logic here, because isn't prevention always the best medicine? And some would argue that Frederick Valentich is an example of where an unidentified aerial or anomalous object may have been responsible for bringing down his aircraft, which resulted in his death. So, I'm not necessarily stating that, because I don't know what happened to Frederick Valentich. I know what has been what the hypotheses are and the explanations that have been put forward. But some would argue that is an example of where potentially, UAP was responsible for the bringing down of an aircraft and the death of human life. And I think someone that we have seen very frequently on this topic is Ryan Graves, and I think he says it really well in this podcast with Dr. Brian Keating from July of last year. So let me play this, as I feel it's a good pushback on Brett Biddington's comments there and thinking.
Be disappointing, and I mean, you can comment on this too, Ari, but that if the only way to get attention to things that could be extremely dangerous but prosaic, in other words, it could be drone or whatever, it could be less prosaic, like alien technology or somewhere in between, like a military adversary. But the only way to get attention is to whistleblow. It seems like a broken system.
It's either that or someone crashes into it and then they investigate, and then it'll become an issue. But
that's why we have the safety data, so we can retroactively look at what the problem was, right? So that's how we do it. We write our procedures in blood.
And he said that a few times in other odd podcasts. Often procedures are written in blood. So, and now look what look what Navy aviators and other, Air Force pilots and defense personnel, it's mandatory that it's mandated that they have to report observations of UAP. If you see something, you say something. If you see something, you have to report it, as Scott Bray said in the 2022 hearing. Now, sadly, it's sad that it takes a tragic event. It's a sad sign of the times if it would take a tragic event like loss of life or loss of an aircraft to inform change. And sadly, that's why I say Australia is still very much, where the US was several years, decades ago. I mean, we're where the US was in 2004, following the Nimitz Tic Tac case. It wasn't taken seriously. It was kind of brushed off. And then in 2015, you had Ryan Graves and his squadron. There's no reporting mechanism in place. They're having to file out hazard reports to get anyone in their high ups to take this topic seriously. And so now look what is happening in the US, courtesy of AARO. You have mandatory reporting across all of the services. If you see something, you need to say something. You need to report it. And so this is where I would kind of remind Brett, again, respectfully, if we pull up ODNI's preliminary assessment on UAP, let me just zoom on in there so it's a bit easier on the eyes. This came out in 25th of June of 2021. And what does the report say? If I scroll down to the key paragraph, as of the time of the reporting of this preliminary assessment, the UAP task force has 11 reports of documented instances in which pilots reported near misses with a UAP. So how is that, if following those near misses, nothing was done, how is that exercising a duty of care of your servicemen and women? It's not. So what did they do? They did something about it. It's taken them a long time, but they now have mandatory reporting mechanisms in place. And so that number has increased from 11 now to, I believe, 14 is the current number. There are 14 reports of near misses with UAP. So you don't want to wait for it to become a tragedy. You want to prevent the tragedy. So that's why I applaud, you got to applaud the US Department of Defense's efforts and AARO's efforts to destigmatize the topic and at least, encourage folks to report something if they see something. So there's data-driven assessments that can be made and mitigating strategies can be put in place to address the UAP issue. And Australia's not even bothered about that thing. Move along, folks. Nothing to see here. Our existing, safety mechanisms are sufficient. You're all good. I disagree. So let's go back to an earlier document. We're going to have a look at, this one was now ODNI's, if I pull up the right one, here we go. So this is now, again, I'll zoom on in. This is now a follow-up report, the ODNI's annual report on UAP in 2022. And wouldn't you know, if we come down to page 3, I'll read that one. UAP events continue to occur in restricted or sensitive areas, highlighting possible concerns for safety of flight or adversary collection activity. And more importantly, to the conversation at hand, or was that the one? This one. There we go. UAP pose a safety of flight and collision hazard to air assets, potentially requiring aircraft operators to adjust flight patterns in response to their unauthorized presence in the airspace, operating outside of air traffic control standards and instruction. So I would push back respectfully, Brett, and use that as a counter argument that it's not just me that's saying this; it's the U.S. Department of Defense. It's folks that have come from that space of serving their country and being at the front lines as naval aviators and being frustrated that they didn't have reporting mechanisms in place and trying to avoid procedures being written in blood. So, just more supporting evidence to back the argument that why doesn't Australia have some sensible see something reporting mechanisms for its servicemen and women. Here's another document. This is from February of the 11th of December of 2023 for the February Senate estimates. And I'm just going to come on down to page 2. This one here. So this, is kind of like a talk track for Chief of Air Force if he's asked this question. If raised, has the US shared intelligence regarding UAP? Defense will continue to monitor and engage with the AARO on UAP, especially if UAP are deemed to be a security or safety threat. Well, they 100% are, because we've heard Kirsten Gillibrand mention that. We've heard Dr. John Kosloski say that. We've heard it from the off-camera media roundtable commentary, and we've seen it in black and white in AARO's Consolidated Annual Report for fiscal year 2024. So I went, based on this information, what I went after, and actually see if there was any, what I wanted to show you was, following this commentary that was included in this document, that defense will continue to monitor and engage with the AARO. Well, I thought, all right, well, what engagement has there been? Because we know that AARO still has flagged UAP as a safety of flight risk and security threat. So I thought, all right, well, what engagement, what evidence is there to support that statement that the Australian Department of Defense has made in that Senate estimates brief? And so I went after, on the 10th of October of this year, I put in a FOIA request. stating that the United States has shared intelligence on UAP. Defense will continue to monitor and engage with the AARO on UAP, especially if they are deemed to be a security or safety threat. What you saw in that document. The request, on consideration of the above statement, please be advised that I wish to submit the following FOI request. I kindly request documentary evidence of engagement by and between Defence and the AARO on UAP between the dates of 1st of May 2023, which would incorporate, the Five Eyes inaugural UAP caucus working group meeting on the 24th of May to the 10th of October 2024 at the time I submitted this request. I have identified no documents as falling within the scope of the request. So is that to suggest that there's been no engagement between Defence and AARO between those date ranges, even though they've said that they will continue to monitor and engage AARO? Well, the issue that I have is that the individual that conducted the searches for this request to ensure that all reasonable steps have been taken, I have caused personnel from the Royal Australian Air Force, including within the Office of the Air and Space Attaché, notably within Washington, D.C., to undertake searches across relevant systems to identify documents relating to the scope of the applicant's request. No records were found. And the reason why I think no records was found is because it is more than likely that the intelligence community, I believe specifically, and I believe this with a high degree of confidence, that it was the Defence Intelligence Organization that attended AARO's Five Eyes working group meeting in May 2024 and continues to engage AARO on the UAP topic to date, and may have well been engaged in conversations prior to AARO's establishment with the UAP task force, so dating back to 2021 and 2022, and maybe even earlier. I haven't seen any documentary evidence of that, but that's a thread that I'm trying to pull. So again, frustrating that there's no records available at the moment of that engagement, and for the reasons that I stated. Let me kind of go on off a little bit topic there of Brett Biddington, but I did want to bring it back to this document. So this is the document that Brett Biddington prepared for the Chief of Air Staff, now referred to as the Chief of Air Force, or the CAF, on RAF's unusual aerial sightings policy. And this is a document from 1993. I won't read through the whole document. I've just highlighted a couple of pages at the end. Now, Brett Biddington, in that audio you heard, he talked about, how he recommended to the Chief of Air Force that there be a policy change. Well, this was his recommendation. For many years, the RAF has been formally responsible for handling unusual aerial sightings, UAS, at the official level. Consideration of the scientific record suggests that whilst not all UAS have a ready explanation, there is no compelling reason for the RAF to continue to devote resources to recording, investigating, and attempting to explain UAS. Well, this was 93. It's now 2024. We live in a very different time. The landscape on the UAP topic is very different. But aside from that, the RAF no longer accepts reports on UAS and no longer attempts assignment of cause or allocation of reliability. Members of the community who seek to report a UAS to RAF personnel will be referred to a civil UFO research organization like a MUFON or a state research organization in the first instance. The recommendation being, so on the 15th of October, 1993, this recommendation was submitted and signed by Brett Biddington and was signed off on by the Air Commodore S.T. James on the 19th of October 1993. And in 1994, that's exactly what happened. Civilian UFO organizations would start receiving reports, and in 1996, the Royal Australian Air Force washed its hands and said, we no longer investigate your incidents and reports of UAS. And that was the end of RAF's efforts investigating the UAP topic. So again, my gripe is that, well, we don't live in 1993 or 1996, we live in 2024. Would it therefore not be appropriate for the Australian Department of Defence in 2024 to re-examine, to reassess its long-held, several decades-long position on UAP, UAS, and assess the current potential national security threats and safety of flight risks that UAP pose? Because it clearly poses a national security threat and safety of flight risk in the US, and it clearly poses it in potentially in Canada. They've got an effort underway to come up with recommendations for reporting going forward. We don't know anything about the UK or New Zealand. They're very kind of closed off like Australia. But isn't it about time, folks, that you actually got off the couch and thought, well, we better maybe have a look at this UAP issue and see if it's in the best interest of our service men and women to exercise our duty of care and ensure that they're given the mechanisms and reporting procedures they need to feel confident and comfortable to report observations of anomalous activity that they see in Australian airspace. Because if the whole objective is to maintain air dominance, well, how can you if you've got no reporting mechanisms in place and you've got F-35 pilots that are sitting down with Ross Coulthart saying that we're seeing anomalous objects, we're not reporting it because that's the sense we're getting from our Chief of Air Force. It's not a topic that should be taken seriously. So that is all I will say on Brett Biddington. But let's go back to the podcast, because I now want to get into what I am really interested in, and that is where we are at to date. And these three folks will come as no surprise to a few of you. On the left, Greens Senator Peter Whish-Wilson. In the middle, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade, Senator Penny Wong, and now former Chief of Air Force Air Marshal Robert Chipman. He's now the Deputy Chief of Defence, I believe. Anyway, so this is, I could have his title slightly wrong here, but he's now no longer the Chief of Air Force. That's with Stephen Chappell. So let's have a listen to this clip from, I believe it was episode 3 or 4, can't quite recall, of Season 4 of Expanse Uncropped.
Meanwhile, in Australia, it seems a bit da-di-da-di-da. A couple of months later, in October 2021, a Tasmanian Greens senator started asking questions. Prompted by that report and a trusted friend from the Defence Forces who'd also experienced something bizarre and unexplained, Senator Peter Whish-Wilson wanted to know exactly what the Australian Department of Defence was doing. Short answer, not much. No, the Department of Defence had not formally reviewed the report. No, Defence Force personnel have no protocol for reporting UFOs or UAP or whatever you want to call them up the military chain. Senator Whish-Wilson wasn't done though. A year later, he was back at it in Senate estimates.
Are you aware of military exercises being cancelled because of concerns around air safety and observations of UAPs?
Is this a UFO question?
Clearly, Senator Penny Wong did not feel the same sense of urgency.
You could call them a UFO if you like, Senator Wong.
Really?
They're now technically
So just so I'm clear.
Unidentified aerial phenomena. Do you think it's funny?
I haven't been here for... Well, I think I've asked questions about this.
That's okay. Well,
I'm not sure we can.
Asking.
Can we assist at all, the Senator, with this line of questioning?
His fellow senators may have been bemused, but Whish-Wilson did get an answer from the Chief of Air Force.
I am aware that there is reports due in the United States. If there is anything in that reporting that raises anything that would be a concern to us in our airspace, then we'll take that seriously.
Since you've taken over as Chief of Air Force, in what capacity, if any at all, have you been briefed on the UAP phenomena since you've taken over the role in July?
Senator, I haven't had any specific briefings in relation to UAP since I've taken over.
So this is where I have to say I really, really appreciate Daniel O'Neill's research here and due diligence and calling out the Australian Department of Defence and Royal Australian Air Force's real lack of interest and engagement on the UAP topic, as well as calling attention there to Senator Penny Wong's complete ignorance and derision of the topic. Is this a UFO question? Proves without a doubt, and that was in November of 2022. Hopefully she's changed her tune since then. But, as of that date, November of 2022, it just shows you that stigma, unfortunately, was still alive and well in the halls of government. But I do hold hope that perhaps there will be a change over time. And I think the media has a part to play in that by undertaking some serious and respectful reporting like Danielle O'Neill is doing. So again, those of you that watch a lot of the episodes that I've done on the Unexplained Rundown, this will come as no surprise what you're hearing. We've covered it extensively on this show a number of times. But for those of you that are new to the topic, it's a good abridged summary for you. Let's now advance it further. This is where I really get quite excited because I feel so proud that I've been able to contribute to essentially the source material that Danielle has now been able to report on in these last 2 episodes of Uncropped. So this is now talking about the Freedom of Information Act documents that I've been able to secure released through the Freedom of Information Act that really call out the Australian Department of Defence's complete ignorance and lack of transparency and engagement on this topic. So let me play this clip for you. This is on the topic of FOIA documents.
A bunch of Freedom of Information documents from the Department of Defence, released in 2022 and 23, also make for some interesting reading. Key points. Since Brett's recommendation shut down the Air Force's handling of UFO reports back in the 90s, there's been no systematic gathering of the public's intel. The Department of Defence doesn't even have a policy that covers internal reporting of UAP. They did have one, but it was canned in 2013. They're basically like, well, no one was making reports, so why would we investigate something that doesn't appear to be happening, let alone actually be a problem? I can't help but compare this to what was happening in the States over roughly the same time. The media coverage here was less New York Times, serious report, more pop it in for some colour. One news article even says Whish-Wilson is pursuing the matter of little green men from Mars.
And again, now we're seeing a shift in how the media is covering the topic. Again, thanks to the likes of the Canberra Times, news.com.au, ABC, A Current Affair even. So, but what is it going to take for the Australian Department of Defence and the RAF to kind of get off its ass and take this topic seriously? As the potential national security threat and safety of flight risk that we know it is, that we keep hearing from AARO and the US DOD time and time again. When will the Australian Department of Defence reassess its long-held position from back in 1996 that there's nothing to see, folks, move along? Because their heads, unfortunately, are still buried in the sand, and I would say go so far as up their ass. They're still not publicly taking this topic seriously, but I think there is engagement and interest behind closed doors, and that's where we're going with these last couple of clips. Now we talk about what everyone has learned through this channel, through this live stream. So again, I'm really pleased that I've been able to contribute to the source material that Danielle has been able to use to compile this content. So this is about the now infamous Five Eyes inaugural UAP caucus working group on UAP that the Australian Department of Defence initially denied that it attended, and then did a 180 backflip admission and admitted that it did.
What do you make of what is happening in the US?
Well, I think one of the key points is that the US government have come out and now said that the phenomena is real, that it's not psychological, it's not imaginary.
And in comparison to the US, where do you feel Australia is at in this conversation?
I think Australia has dropped the ball in this area. It might be all very well for something to be done covertly, but that doesn't reassure the general public. It's disappointing that we're not following the lead of the US openly anyway.
This theory that the Australian government is conducting some kind of covert examination of UAP, there's not much I've been able to find that backs that up. Although, there is this one thing that people keep mentioning to me. I heard it first from Jeremy Corbell.
Our government has been lying to us in the US. Your government as well, by the way. When you look at the Five Eyes Alliance, your government has as well about this topic. I'm telling you as a tip.
The Five Eyes Alliance. It's an intelligence sharing arrangement between 5 English-speaking democracies: the US, UK, Canada, Australia and New Zealand. Essentially, the Five Eyes met for an inaugural UAP working group at the Pentagon in 2023 with the aim of developing a framework for future UAP collaboration. Australia's Department of Defence was asked if we attended. They said no. Then, a few months later,
they came back and said yes, representatives from Australia did attend a briefing about UFOs.
Some people took this as proof the government wasn't being honest about their interest in UAP.
Yes, I do believe that the Australian government, in the terms of the Department of Defence, has a covert interest in the topic at the present moment.
So there you go, and great to get some commentary from Keith there. He and I share the opinion that it's more than likely the intelligence community, more than likely the Defence Intelligence Organisation are the ones that were in attendance at AARO's Five Eyes working group meeting, and that have in the past and continue to be engaged on this topic. And again, those of you that watch this channel will know that we've covered the Five Eyes, AARO's Five Eyes forum on UAP extensively. And again, I just feel kind of a proud moment that I've been able to support the conversation and the efforts that folks like Danielle O'Neill are putting out to now reveal this information to a much larger audience, because I'm only a very small channel. The Canberra Times, wonderful article, but it's only one medium. The ABC has a pretty big audience, as does news.com.au, as does A Current Affair. So, but to date, it's only been the Canberra Times and now the ABC that have called out the Australian Department of Defence's complete lack of transparency and, quite frankly, its incompetence on this entire topic and its lack of engagement on the conversation. So again, I've said this before, the US and Australia, we couldn't be, we're the closest of allies, but we couldn't be further apart still on the topic of UAP. And my hope is that will change in the not too distant future. I still hold out hope on that front. The last clip that I want to show you again talks about the Australian Department of Defence's initial denial and then its about face and admittance. Is that the word? It admitting that it then did attend the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. And this is all because of, not to blow my own trumpet, but because of the work that I and Senator Whish-Wilson have done to try and get this information out so that it's transparency is something we cherish and value dearly, and that people have a right to know this information. So this is the last clip from the Uncropped Uncropped series on the Expanse podcast, season 4.
So, like when Australia closed their UFO files, and people thought there were other files still hidden away that couldn't be produced because they didn't exist. This is where that slip-up about whether Australia did or didn't attend the Five Eyes briefing matters, because it gives some kernel of truth to the idea that there are things the government isn't telling us.
It opens the door to people saying, well, if they lie to us about the small things, maybe they're also lying to us about the big things.
Even if there is literally nothing else of note from the government about this, there is a doubt, because on this question, they weren't straight. Couldn't
have said it better myself. So bravo, Danielle O'Neill. I thoroughly enjoyed what you put out in season 4 of Expanse Uncropped. And again, I would encourage any of you that have not listened to it, the link is in the show notes below. So would definitely encourage you to check it out. And I know a few of you have made some comments. So let's just go back and have a look at some of the comments that have come through. Did Brett Biddington look at the Valentich case in the Bass Strait? I'm not too sure, Gareth. I probably better to defer that question to some historians that know a lot more than I on the UAP topic. I'm pretty much, my knowledge and research is post 1996, so I'm not so au fait with anything prior to that. So, but George Simpson has done a wonderful book on the Frederick Valentich case called Nothing on Radar, and I'm sure Bill Chalker and Keith Basterfield would probably be better positioned to answer that question than I can. Plant Watering Citizen, the audio from the Valentich case is one of the scariest things I've ever listened to. Yeah, we've played it on this channel. It was only earlier this year that the actual recording from both Valentich and the air traffic controller was released by Valentich's then girlfriend at the time, and so fitting that she released the footage. But yes, incredibly chilling footage. Again, still unresolved. Don't know what unfortunately happened to Valentich, but truly harrowing footage when you hear it, and close your eyes and hear it. Good point, Jimmy. Unknowns need to be investigated in my opinion. Yeah, like quote George Knapp, and he said this a number of times, and I've borrowed it from him. You really need to investigate the unexplained, not explain the uninvestigated, and I think that's so very true. A couple other comments that have come through. Thank you, Jimmy. Appreciate your vote of confidence, my friend. Wish you got a shout out, Grant. Thank you, my friend. Plant Watering Citizen, ta-di-di-da-da, or however Danielle said, is a very effective and fitting description of where we're at globally. That's true, certainly for Australia on this topic. Thank you, Ducati girl. Appreciate all the work you're putting in, Grant. I truly appreciate your support. Struz7, definitely going to give this Expanse podcast a listen. Yes, it's really, really good. Again, it's on Spotify, or you can watch it on just the ABC Expanse's website. Links for the website edition are in the show notes below. I don't think I've linked the Spotify one, although it is on my X. If you want to have a look at it on my X account, you'll see a post there. Later, hope they go to credit, Grant. Not looking for credit. Appreciate the kind words and support there, though. I'm just thrilled that an outlet like the ABC that has a broad audience has been able to get this information out and educate the largely unaware public. So that's why I feel proud and kind of validated, really, that I've been able to assist the effort in increasing public awareness. Because again, I only have a very small channel, and I rely on folks like you to get the word out and retweet information on X and so on. So thank you also for your wonderful support and comments there, Plant Watering Citizen. I truly appreciate it. And imagine if we had a Ross Coulthart on the podcast. Maybe I'm be interested to learn if he was approached for the podcast, or maybe they just wanted to look at some of the. I suspect that I certainly think Keith and Bill were wonderful choices, and it's great that they got some experiences in there, and it's also good for the other side of the conversation that they got Brett Biddington to provide some commentary in there as well. So yeah. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I would encourage you all to have a listen to it if you haven't already. As we kind of wrap things up, folks, again, I've done it again. I've cracked the 3-hour mark. I'm on fire every single time I do this live stream. But I do want to talk about briefly a wonderful documentary that I recently saw on YouTube. It's called The Real Top Gun, World War II Nukes and UFOs. It's a wonderful documentary on a gentleman by the name of Tom Dalton Morgan. And I've been in contact with for some time now with the gentleman that produced this documentary. I'm not going to play the documentary. I've linked it in the show notes below, but I will play for you a brief trailer that the gentleman, I won't say his name because I don't know if he's wanted that information to be public, but nonetheless, I'll show you this trailer that he has put together on Tom Dalton Morgan.
The story of the greatest hero you've never known. A man who was pivotal to some of the most defining moments in history. From Dunkirk and D-Day to NATO and the nuclear arms race. His secrets hold the truth to the biggest question of mankind. Are we alone? His story has never been told. That man is my grandfather.
So really, really good documentary. It doesn't kind of give a whole lot away about the documentary, but I will share with you a couple key bits of information. So Tom Dalton Morgan, very mysterious fellow. He was, had a significant involvement in secret UFO investigations in the UK and in Australia. So the link is in the show notes, obviously, so you can watch it. But an interesting fact, so not only was Tom Dalton Morgan stationed at Woomera, which is located in South Australia, which was in the 50s and 60s and even through to today, a top secret military testing range and installation, Woomera. And in the 50s and 60s, there were countless sightings of anomalous objects in the sky, flying saucers. There was even a dedicated UFO research organization in the Woomera vicinity. So, fun fact, and I only kind of put this together following watching this great documentary. Not only was Tom Dalton Morgan stationed at Woomera, also stationed at Woomera for a time was Harry Turner, who we know thanks to Bill Chalker's great work, and he's met with and interviewed Harry Turner for a number of times. Harry Turner was the guy. He was the J.L.N. Hynek of Australia, basically, investigated UFOs for the Department of Air Force, was it DAFI, DAFI, Department of Air Force, I can't remember. No, Air Force Director, whatever the acronym is, DAFI. And who else was stationed at Woomera in the late 1950s and 60s? This gentleman. This gentleman is my late uncle. This is Desmond Barnsley, affectionately went by Des. And he was the project manager for a top secret project called RESAT, which was responsible for launching Australia's first satellite into orbit. And this is a photo of Des with some of his project leads, looking at some of the, assets that they were putting together. So unfortunately, I never got an opportunity to sit down with Des before he passed and pick his brain about his work at Woomera and the countless observations of anomalous objects being sighted at Woomera. But again, it's just such a small world that I learned that Tom Dalton Morgan was stationed there, as was Harry Turner for a time, as was Des Barnsley. So what I wouldn't have given to be a fly on the wall for some of the conversations that were had in Woomera in their day. I'm sure it would have been truly fascinating. I'll leave you with this, folks. What's ahead? This is the last thing I'm going to mention. An exciting December is ahead because the program is now scheduled for release on the 16th of December. So I imagine that'll be the 17th of December for us. So James Fox has secured distribution through a number of platforms, I believe, but the one that is probably most well known to folks is Apple Plus. And so I'll just show you. There we go. This is the Apple TV Plus. This is the website for the program. It's linked in the show notes below. So if you want to have a look at the trailer, feel free. I'm pretty excited to see what is included in this documentary. I mean, we know there have been a few. We've been drip fed a couple of bits of information. We know that Jason Sands is obviously rumored to be featured in it. To what degree, we don't know. Sarah Gam as well, and other whistleblowers that have not yet been revealed in the public eye. So it should be a very, very interesting documentary. So I'm going to be pre-ordering that. That's not just me plugging the program, but I'm very interested to watch it. So if you're keen to watch it as well, check out the link in the show notes below. That, my friends, is today's show. 3 hours and 7 minutes. We've done it again. We've cracked it. I will one of these days get it down to 2 hours. Trust me. But again, I do really appreciate all of you taking some time out of your morning, your evening to be with me. I really appreciate the engagement, the comments and questions that you always submit in the chat. It really does prove to me that I do have some content that is of interest to folks. So thank you, Chili Farm Brisbane. Appreciate your comments. A couple other comments that have come through. Yes, I've considered doing a deep dive on Des. My late, well, certainly for that gentleman to do a deep dive of his, of Tom Dalton Morgan, his family relative. But I've considered doing not a deep dive, but a review of Des. But I think that would be a much larger effort, and with two little ones, it's pretty hard to find the time. But yeah, definitely worthwhile having a look at that documentary on Tom Dalton Morgan. Dad was at Maralinga. Wow, interesting. I think we got to pick your brain at some point over a beer, Chili Farm. Any time I'm up in Brisbane and you're down here, be very interesting to have a chat indeed. Ducati Girl asks, well, was your dad affected by the testing? Obviously, the British did atomic testing at Maralinga. Pretty disgusting what the Australian government unfortunately didn't inform the Indigenous population, and a lot of them got very sick from contamination. So Stride 7, can't wait for the program. LiDAR Anomalous, thank you for your kind words, my friend. I really appreciate it. And Ham photographed with Clapper too. Yes. I think you meant Gam. Sarah Gam was had a photograph with James Clapper, and appreciate your kind words, my friend. So there are all the comments. Wanted to showcase your comments because you have invested the time to enter some thoughts. So I'm pleased I've been able to share them. As always, friends, thank you for taking some time out of your morning, your day, your graveyard shift for embarking with me on another journey and trying to get to the bottom of what Australia is doing about this UAP topic. So until next time, folks, look forward to seeing you on a future episode of the Unexplained Rundown. And bye for now.
If you have enjoyed this episode of the Unexplained Rundown, please consider giving it a thumbs up, sharing with your friends, family, colleagues, and social network, as well as subscribing to the channel. And if you'd like to be notified whenever the Unexplained Rundown goes live, premieres, or posts a new video, be sure to ring that cowbell.